The rain had been falling since dawn, washing the city in shades of silver and charcoal. From the 7th floor of St. Augustine Medical Center, the streets below looked like blurred watercolor paintings, where headlights melted into puddles and umbrellas drifted through the storm like dark flowers. Inside room 714, only the quiet rhythm of a heart monitor disturbed the silence. Alexander Blackwood slowly opened his eyes. The world was painfully bright. Every breath pulled against bruised ribs, and a dull ache pulsed behind his temples. For a long moment, he simply stared at the white ceiling, trying to understand where he was. His thoughts felt scattered, as if someone had torn the pages from the book of his life and left only a few behind. The accident. He remembered rain, a sharp turn, blinding headlights. Then, nothing. The hospital room came into focus little by little. A bouquet of white lilies rested on the windowsill. A leather watch sat neatly folded beside his phone on the bedside table. Neither felt familiar. The door creaked open. A young woman stepped inside, carrying the scent of rain and jasmine. She froze the moment their eyes met. For a heartbeat, neither of them spoke. Then her face softened into a trembling smile. "Alex," her voice cracked with relief. "You woke up." She hurried toward him, stopping just beside the bed. Tears shimmered in her hazel eyes, though she fought to keep them from falling. "I was so scared." She reached for his hand. Alexander instinctively pulled it away. The movement was small, almost unconscious, but it changed everything. Her smile disappeared. Confusion slowly replaced hope. He searched her face carefully. She was beautiful in a quiet way. Long chestnut hair framed delicate features, and there was a sadness in her eyes that felt strangely heavy. He knew with absolute certainty he had never seen her before. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice rough from days without speaking. "Who are you?" Silence. The words lingered between them like broken glass. She blinked. Once. Twice. A nervous laugh escaped her lips. "Very funny." "I'm not joking." Her breathing became uneven. "Alex." His gaze never left hers. "I don't know you." Color drained from her face. The tears she had been holding back finally escaped. "No," she whispered. "No, you remember me." He wished he could say he did. He wished something inside him would recognize her. But there was only emptiness. "I don't." She lowered her eyes before slowly lifting her left hand. A simple platinum wedding ring caught the light. Then she looked at his hand. He followed her gaze. An identical ring rested on his own finger. His heartbeat quickened. "You..." She swallowed hard. "I'm your wife." The room suddenly felt much smaller. Alexander stared at the ring as though it belonged to someone else. Married? He searched his memories desperately. There were fragments: business meetings, boardrooms, private jets, a sprawling mansion, a little girl laughing somewhere in a garden. But no wedding, no vows, no wife. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I don't remember marrying anyone." The sentence broke her. She covered her mouth to stop herself from crying aloud. For several seconds, neither of them moved. Only the rain continued tapping gently against the windows. Finally, she forced herself to speak. "My name is Clara." She smiled through tears. "You always said hearing my name made the hardest days easier." Alexander looked at her with genuine regret. "I wish it did." Before Clara could answer, the door opened again. 3 elegantly dressed figures entered the room. An older man with silver hair, a poised woman in a tailored black suit, and a younger man whose expression instantly darkened when he saw Clara standing beside the bed. "She's here?" the older woman said coldly. Clara straightened. "I came to see my husband." "Husband?" The woman almost laughed. "You've already done enough." Alexander frowned. "Can someone please tell me what's happening?" The silver-haired man stepped forward first. "I'm Edward Blackwood." He offered a gentle smile. "Your father." Something flickered inside Alexander's mind. Recognition. Faint, but real. Then the elegant woman spoke. "I'm Eleanor." "Your mother?" The younger man nodded. "Nathan. Your brother." Unlike Clara, their faces stirred tiny pieces of memory, not enough to remember details, but enough to feel they belonged somewhere in the life he had lost. His mother turned toward Clara without hiding her dislike. "You shouldn't be here." Clara met her gaze. "I wasn't leaving him alone." "You already have." Alexander looked from one face to another. His pulse began to rise. No one in the room was telling the same story, and somewhere beneath the confusion, he felt the unmistakable sensation that someone was lying. Alexander's gaze moved from Clara to the people standing around his hospital bed. His head throbbed harder with every passing second. No one spoke. No one seemed willing to explain why the room felt less like a family reunion and more like a courtroom. Finally, Alexander broke the silence. "Someone tell me the truth." Edward sighed heavily before pulling a chair closer to the bed. The doctors explained that the accident caused selective retrograde amnesia. Some memories may return, others may never come back. Alexander nodded slowly. "So I remember my parents." "Partly. My brother. A little." He glanced toward Clara. "But not my wife." The word felt strange leaving his lips. Clara lowered her eyes. Eleanor crossed her arms. "Because your mind is protecting you." Alexander frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means," Eleanor said calmly, "your marriage hasn't been what Clara wants you to believe." Clara looked up sharply. "Please don't. You've lied long enough." "I have never lied to him." Nathan stepped between them before the argument could grow louder. "This isn't helping, Alex." "No," Eleanor replied. "What's hurting him is pretending everything was perfect." Alexander looked back at Clara. "Were we happy?" The question lingered in the air. Clara hesitated, not because she wanted to lie, but because the truth was complicated. "We loved each other." Alexander noticed she hadn't answered his question. "Were we happy?" A tear slipped down her cheek. "We were trying." Eleanor gave a bitter smile. "There, even she can't say yes." Edward rubbed his forehead. "Enough." But Alexander couldn't let it go. "What happened to us?" No one answered, until Nathan quietly spoke. "You changed." Everyone looked at him. Nathan continued carefully. "About 6 months ago, you became distant. You buried yourself in work. You stopped coming to family dinners. You barely slept. You barely smiled." Alexander searched Nathan's face. "Why?" "We don't know." Clara did. She remembered every sleepless night, every silent dinner, every panic attack Alex tried to hide. But she had promised him never to tell anyone, not even his family. So she remained silent. Alexander noticed. "You know something." She met his eyes. "I know things that belong to you." "What does that mean?" She forced a sad smile. "They're your memories. They should come back because you remember them, not because I tell you." For the first time since waking up, Alexander felt something other than confusion. Respect. There was something gentle about the way she refused to force his memories. Something honest. Then Eleanor interrupted. "How noble." Clara ignored her. Edward checked his watch. "The neurologist will be here soon." Almost on cue, another knock echoed through the room. A woman in a white coat entered carrying a tablet. "Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Evelyn Carter." She smiled warmly at Alexander. "It's good to see you awake." Alexander returned the smile. "Apparently everyone knows me except me." She laughed softly. "That's normal." She glanced around the crowded room. "I'd like a few minutes alone with my patient." Everyone reluctantly stepped outside. Everyone, except Clara. Eleanor immediately protested. "She doesn't need to stay." Dr. Carter looked toward Alexander. "Who would you like in the room?" Alexander hesitated. He barely knew any of them anymore. Yet, when he looked at Clara, her eyes held nothing except concern. No anger, no pressure, just quiet hope. "I think," he said slowly, "she can stay." For a brief second, Clara looked genuinely surprised. Eleanor's jaw tightened. Without another word, she left the room with Edward and Nathan. The door clicked shut. Silence returned. Dr. Carter pulled up a chair. "I've reviewed your scans. The swelling in your brain is already improving. Physically, you're going to recover." "And my memory?" She paused. "I can't promise when or if it will return completely." Alexander looked down at the wedding ring again. "What if it never comes back?" "Then you'll create new memories." He nodded, though the answer brought little comfort. Dr. Carter continued, "There's something important you should know. People will try to fill in the blanks for you. They'll tell you who you were, what you believed, who you loved." She leaned forward. "Listen to everyone. But don't let anyone decide your memories for you." After she finished the examination, she smiled. "I'll see you tomorrow." Once she left, the room became quiet again. Alexander stared out at the rain. Without looking at Clara, he asked, "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "If we're really married, why do I feel like everyone wants you gone?" Clara's fingers tightened around the strap of her handbag. She had asked herself the same question for years. Finally, she answered with painful honesty. "Because loving you came with a price." Alexander slowly turned toward her. "What does that mean?" She looked into his eyes, the same gray-blue eyes she'd fallen in love with 4 years earlier. "I think," she whispered, "that's something you'll have to remember on your own." She gave him one last, gentle smile before walking toward the door. Just before leaving, she stopped. "Oh," Alexander looked up. "You always hated hospitals. You said they smelled like endings." She opened the door. "So I promised that when you got out, I'd take you somewhere that smelled like new beginnings." Then she disappeared into the hallway. Alexander sat motionless. For reasons he couldn't explain, the scent of jasmine still lingered in the room. And somehow, it felt familiar. Alexander was discharged 3 days later. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the city washed clean beneath a pale morning sun. As he stepped outside the hospital, he instinctively closed his eyes, breathing in the crisp autumn air. Freedom should have felt comforting. Instead, it felt unfamiliar. A sleek black sedan waited by the entrance. Nathan opened the rear door. "Ready to go home?" Home. The word echoed strangely in Alexander's mind. As the car pulled away from the hospital, he watched the city pass by through the tinted window. Every street seemed almost recognizable, like scenes from a dream he couldn't quite remember. Nathan tried to lighten the mood. "You'll laugh about all this one day." Alexander managed a faint smile. "I hope so." They drove through towering iron gates that slowly opened onto an enormous estate. Blackwood Manor. The mansion stood proudly atop a hill, surrounded by ancient oak trees and perfectly sculpted gardens. Ivy climbed its stone walls, while tall windows reflected the gray sky above. Alexander stared. "I live here?" "Nathan, you've lived here your whole life." As the car stopped beneath the grand entrance, a team of house staff hurried outside. An elderly butler greeted him first. "Welcome home, Mr. Blackwood." His eyes glistened with relief. "It's wonderful to see you standing again." Alexander smiled politely. "I'm sorry. I wish I remembered you." The butler bowed slightly. Memory returns. Kindness never leaves. Those words lingered with Alexander as he stepped inside. The manor was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers shimmered above polished marble floors. A sweeping staircase curved toward the second floor. The scent of cedarwood and old books filled the air. It felt less like a house and more like history. Yet, despite its beauty, something about it felt cold, empty, as though laughter hadn't echoed through its halls in years. Nathan showed him around slowly. The library, the dining room, your office, the East Wing. Every room stirred tiny flashes in Alexander's mind. Nothing complete, only fragments. A fireplace, a birthday toast, someone laughing, someone crying. By the time they reached the second floor, exhaustion settled over him. Nathan stopped outside a pair of dark oak doors. "This is your room." Alexander pushed them open. His bedroom looked more like a luxury hotel suite. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the gardens. Dark walnut bookshelves lined one wall. A grand piano rested near the fireplace. Everything was immaculate. Too immaculate, almost untouched. He walked slowly through the room. His fingertips brushed across framed photographs sitting atop the dresser. Business awards, magazine covers, family portraits. Then, one frame caught his attention. It had been turned face down. Alexander frowned. He picked it up. A photograph. His heart skipped. It showed him standing beneath strings of golden lights, his arm wrapped around Clara. She was laughing at something he had whispered into her ear. Neither of them looked at the camera. Neither seemed aware the picture was being taken. It wasn't posed. It was real. The happiness on his own face startled him. He had never smiled like that in any of the other photographs. He gently traced the image with his thumb. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Eleanor entered without waiting for permission. Her eyes immediately landed on the photograph. For the briefest moment, her expression hardened. She walked over calmly and took the frame from his hands. "That picture shouldn't be here." Alexander looked at her. "Why not?" "It belongs in storage." She placed it inside a nearby drawer and quietly closed it. "Mom, if she's my wife, why hide our pictures?" "Because they make you emotional." "I don't remember feeling emotional." "You don't remember a great many things." Alexander crossed his arms. "I want the truth." Eleanor walked toward the window. For a long moment she remained silent. Finally, she spoke. "When your father built Blackwood Holdings, he expected you to inherit everything. You did. But after marrying Clara, you changed." "In what way?" "You stopped thinking like a Blackwood." Alexander frowned. "What does that even mean?" "You became softer. You donated millions without consulting the board. You canceled profitable projects. You refused partnerships that would have doubled our fortune." She turned to face him. "You let your emotions make business decisions." Alexander stared at her. "And that's because of Clara?" "I believe so." Her answer came too quickly, too confidently, as if she had rehearsed it. Just then, another knock echoed through the room. The butler stepped inside. "Excuse me, Mr. Blackwood. There's someone at the gate." Eleanor's expression darkened instantly. "Who?" The butler hesitated. "It's Mrs. Blackwood." Silence. Alexander looked toward the door. Clara had come. Before he could speak, Eleanor answered. "Tell security she isn't coming inside." The butler didn't move. Instead, he looked at Alexander, waiting. For the first time since waking up, the decision belonged to him. Alexander looked from the butler to his mother. The silence stretched until it became unbearable. Finally, he spoke. She's my wife, isn't she? Eleanor's jaw tightened. Legally, yes. Then why is she being kept outside? Because she knows exactly how to manipulate you. Alexander frowned. I don't remember her. Exactly, which makes you vulnerable. He turned to the butler. Let her in. Eleanor stepped forward immediately. Alexander, I said let her in. The butler nodded respectfully before disappearing into the hallway. For the first time since leaving the hospital, Alexander noticed something strange. Everyone in this house seemed afraid of upsetting his mother, even his father, even the staff. It wasn't respect, it was fear. 10 minutes later, Clara entered the manor. She wore a long beige coat and held a small leather box against her chest. She stopped several feet away, careful not to invade his space. You look better. Alexander offered a polite smile. I feel less dizzy. I'm glad. Another silence settled between them. It was awkward, painfully so. This woman claimed to know everything about him, and he knew absolutely nothing about her. She noticed him studying her. You can ask me anything. He hesitated. What do you do? She smiled softly. I'm an architect. You design buildings? I restore old ones. Something flickered inside him. A brief image, dust floating through sunlight, a woman wearing a yellow construction helmet, laughing. The memory vanished before he could hold on to it. He pressed his fingers against his temple. Clara immediately took a step forward. Alex? I'm fine. She stopped herself. She wanted to help him. Instead, she folded her hands together. I brought you something. She held out the leather box. Alexander opened it. Inside rested an old silver compass. Its surface was scratched from years of use. He looked at her questioningly. It doesn't work anymore, she said. You carried it everywhere. Why? You said it reminded you that being lost wasn't the same as never finding your way. Alexander turned the compass over in his hand. It felt important, warm, as though it had lived in his pocket for years. He couldn't explain why. You gave this to me? She laughed quietly. No, you found it in a flea market. You insisted it was the best $10 you'd ever spent. Alexander smiled before realizing he was smiling. It disappeared almost instantly. I don't remember saying things like that. You used to say stranger things. He looked at her. Like what? She thought for a moment. One night you woke me up at 3 a.m. just to tell me that the moon looked lonely. Despite himself, Alexander laughed. It was small, barely audible, but real. Clara smiled. There you are. His laughter faded. What do you mean? For a second, you sounded like yourself. The words lingered between them. Neither noticed Eleanor watching from the hallway. Her expression was unreadable. She quietly walked away. That afternoon, Alexander wandered through the manor alone. Every room felt like it belonged to someone else. The library, the music room, the gallery. He hoped something would awaken another memory. Instead, he found only questions. As he entered his office, his eyes fell upon a large painting hanging above the fireplace. It showed the Blackwood family standing together. Edward, Eleanor, Nathan, Alexander. There was one thing missing. Clara. He stepped closer. The painting looked altered. Near Alexander's shoulder, faint brushstrokes caught the light, as if someone had painted over another figure. His pulse quickened. He leaned in. There had once been someone standing beside him, someone deliberately erased. Behind him, the office door creaked open. The elderly butler stood there, carrying a tray of tea. He followed Alexander's gaze. After a long pause, he spoke quietly. That portrait wasn't always like that. Alexander slowly turned. What do you mean? The old man's eyes filled with hesitation. Then, in almost a whisper, he said, "Someone wanted history, rewritten." Before Alexander could ask another question, footsteps echoed down the hallway. The butler immediately fell silent. Someone was coming. The butler's expression changed the instant the footsteps grew louder. He lowered his eyes and stepped back from the painting. The office door opened. Nathan stood in the doorway. "There you are," he said with an easy smile. "Mom's been looking everywhere for you." Alexander glanced at the butler. "We were talking." Nathan looked between them. "About what?" The old man answered before Alexander could. "Tea, sir." Nathan nodded slowly. "I see." The butler excused himself, carrying the untouched tray back into the hallway. Alexander watched him leave. Something felt wrong. The old man had wanted to say more, he was sure of it. Nathan slipped both hands into his pockets. "You've always liked hiding in here." "I have?" "You said this room was the only place quiet enough to think." Alexander looked around the office. Dark wood shelves reached the ceiling. Hundreds of books, family photographs, business awards. Everything was perfectly organized. Too perfectly. Almost staged. His eyes landed on the massive oak desk. "Was this always my office?" Nathan nodded. "For years." Alexander walked behind the desk. He opened the first drawer. Pens, folders, nothing unusual. The second drawer held old contracts. The third was locked. He looked up. "Do you have the key?" Nathan hesitated for just a fraction of a second. "It must have been lost after the accident." Alexander wasn't convinced. "You seem unsure." Nathan forced a laugh. "A lot has happened." Before Alexander could reply, his phone buzzed. Nathan glanced at the screen. "It's Mom." He declined the call without answering. "She's probably wondering where we are." Alexander slipped the phone into his pocket. "I'll come down in a minute." Nathan smiled. "Don't take too long." The moment he left, Alexander tried the locked drawer again. It refused to move. He knelt beside the desk, examining the lock. A tiny scratch caught his attention. Someone had tried to force it open before. Why? His gaze drifted toward the bookshelf. One shelf looked slightly crooked. Curious, he reached for it. The wood shifted beneath his fingers. A soft click echoed through the room. Hidden behind the books was a narrow compartment. Inside lay a small leather notebook. No title, no initials, just worn brown leather. Alexander opened the first page. His own handwriting stared back at him. "If you're reading this, it means something happened to my memory." His breath caught. He turned the page. "Don't trust anyone until you remember everything, not even me." A chill ran through him. The next sentence made his heart pound. "Especially if my family tells you Clara is the enemy." Footsteps. Close. Someone was outside the office. Alexander slammed the notebook shut and slipped it inside his jacket, just as the doorknob began to turn. The door opened. It was Clara. She stopped when she saw the fear on his face. "Alex?" He remained silent. She noticed the slightly open compartment behind the bookshelf. Then she looked back at him. "You found it." His eyes narrowed. "You knew about this?" She slowly nodded. "I helped you hide it." The room fell silent. Alexander took one cautious step toward her. "My own notebook says not to trust my family." Clara's face softened with sadness. "I was hoping you'd find it." "Why?" "Because I knew," she swallowed, "one day you might need to hear your own voice more than anyone else's." Alexander tightened his grip on the notebook inside his jacket. For the first time since waking up, he wasn't just questioning his memories. He was questioning everyone around him. Alexander couldn't take his eyes off Clara. The leather notebook felt heavier than it should in the pocket of his jacket. "You knew it was here," he said quietly. Yes. And you never told anyone? I promised you I wouldn't. His brow furrowed. I made you promise? Clara nodded. You were afraid someone would find it. Alexander studied her face. She wasn't defensive. She wasn't trying to convince him of anything. She simply looked tired. Why would I hide a notebook from my own family? She looked toward the closed office door before answering. You said there were things you couldn't explain yet. What things? I don't know. His expression hardened. That's not an answer. It's the truth. She took a slow breath. The last few months before the accident, you stopped telling me everything. The confession surprised him. You didn't trust me? I think you were trying to protect me. From what? She shook her head. I never found out. Alexander pulled the notebook from his jacket. I should read it. You should. But not here. Why? Clara lowered her voice. Because walls have ears in this house. A strange feeling settled over him. Every conversation seemed to end with another warning. Every answer created 3 new questions. Before he could open the notebook, a knock echoed through the office. Nathan pushed the door open. There you both are. His smile faded slightly when he noticed the notebook in Alexander's hand. What's that? Alexander answered without thinking. Just an old journal. Nathan's eyes lingered on it for a second too long. I didn't know you kept one. Neither did I. Silence. Then Nathan smiled again. Dinner's ready. As he turned to leave, Alexander caught something unusual. Nathan looked back. Not at him. At the notebook. Only for a second. But it was enough. Dinner was served in the grand dining hall beneath an enormous crystal chandelier. The table could seat 20 people. Tonight, only 5 chairs were occupied. Edward sat quietly at one end, Eleanor at the other, Nathan beside their father, Alexander and Clara across from one another. The atmosphere was painfully formal. The clink of silverware echoed louder than conversation. Finally, Edward cleared his throat. The board has been asking about you. Alexander looked up. The board? Blackwood Holdings. They're concerned about your recovery. I own the company? You own 51%. Alexander nearly dropped his fork. I own most of it? Nathan nodded. You've been CEO for 6 years. Alexander tried to imagine himself running a billion-dollar company. It felt impossible. Eleanor set down her wine glass. The board meeting is next Friday. You're not ready, Clara said immediately. Everyone looked at her. He just left the hospital. He needs time. Eleanor's voice turned icy. The company doesn't have time. Alexander watched the exchange carefully. His mother seemed determined to push him back to work. Clara wanted the opposite. Neither appeared to be pretending. So who was right? As dessert was served, the elderly butler quietly approached Alexander's chair. He leaned down just enough to whisper, Sir. Alexander looked at him. I found something in the archives. Without waiting for a response, the butler slipped a small brass key beneath Alexander's folded napkin. No one must know. Then he walked away as though nothing had happened. Alexander slowly closed his hand around the key. Its shape looked familiar. Very familiar. Then his eyes widened. The locked drawer in his office. This was the key. Alexander kept his expression calm as he slipped the brass key into his pocket. No one at the table seemed to notice, except Eleanor. Her eyes lingered on him for a moment before she returned to her meal. Had she seen the exchange? He couldn't tell. The rest of dinner passed in uneasy silence. Conversation revolved around business, investments, and board meetings, subjects Alexander should have understood, yet they sounded like someone else's life. When everyone finally stood to leave, he waited a full 10 minutes before quietly making his way back to his office. The manor was silent. Only the ticking of an old grandfather clock echoed through the hallway. He closed the office door behind him and locked it. His pulse quickened as he knelt beside the desk. The brass key slid smoothly into the lock. A soft click. The drawer opened. Inside were only 3 things: a thick manila envelope, a silver flash drive, and a folded note written in his own handwriting. Alexander unfolded the note. "If you've opened this, your memory still hasn't returned. Stay calm. Read everything before speaking to anyone." His heart began to race. He opened the envelope first. Dozens of photographs spilled across the desk. Most showed Clara. Some were taken from across the street, others through cafe windows. One showed her leaving an architecture studio. Another showed her entering the manor. None of them looked like family photos. They looked like surveillance. On the back of every photograph was the same handwritten date. Someone had been watching Clara for months. Alexander frowned. Why? He reached for the next document. It was a report from a private investigator. Across the top of the first page, one sentence had been circled in red ink. "Subject appears to be under independent surveillance by an unknown third party." Alexander read it twice. Someone had hired an investigator to follow his wife, but another person had also been following her. His stomach tightened. This wasn't about a troubled marriage. This was something much bigger. He picked up the flash drive. A sticky note was attached. "Watch this alone. Trust your instincts." Before he could inspect it further, voices drifted in from the hallway. He quickly returned everything to the drawer except the folded note, which he slipped inside his jacket. The voices grew louder. His office door opened without warning. It was Edward. His father looked surprised to find him there. "I thought you were resting." "I couldn't sleep." Edward smiled faintly. "You used to come here whenever something was bothering you." Alexander studied him carefully. "Dad." Edward looked up. Was someone following Clara? The question caught him completely off guard. For the first time since the accident, Edward's calm expression cracked. "What makes you ask that?" Alexander didn't answer. Edward sighed and walked toward the window. "When you remember everything," he said quietly, "you'll understand why your mother was so frightened." Alexander's voice remained steady. "Frightened of Clara?" Edward closed his eyes. "No." He turned slowly to face his son. "Frightened of what the two of you were about to uncover." Before Alexander could ask another question, a loud crash echoed from somewhere downstairs. Glass shattered. Then came a scream. Clara's voice. Alexander didn't think. The scream sent him racing out of the office before his father could stop him. "Alex!" Edward shouted behind him. He ignored him. His heart pounded as he rushed down the grand staircase 2 steps at a time. Another crash echoed through the foyer. When he reached the entrance hall, shards of broken glass glittered across the marble floor. The antique vase that had stood there for decades lay shattered. Clara stood frozen in the center of the room, breathing hard. A young maid knelt nearby, her hands trembling. "I'm so sorry," the maid whispered. "It slipped." But Alexander noticed something strange. The vase hadn't simply fallen. It had exploded outward, as though someone had knocked it from the table with force. Nathan hurried into the hall. "What happened?" The maid burst into tears. "I don't know. I was dusting." Clara looked around uneasily. "No." Everyone turned toward her. "It wasn't an accident." Eleanor appeared at the top of the staircase. "What are you implying?" Clara pointed toward the front entrance. "I heard someone running." Nathan frowned. "The doors have been locked all evening." "I'm telling you what I heard." Alexander looked toward the security cameras mounted above the entrance. "There are cameras." Nathan nodded. "We'll check the footage." Something about his quick response felt rehearsed. As the staff cleaned the broken glass, Alexander noticed a folded piece of paper trapped beneath one of the larger fragments. He bent down before anyone else saw it. Without unfolding it, he slipped it into his pocket. Later that evening, he locked himself inside his bedroom. Only then did he remove the note. There were no words, only a small drawing. A compass. Beneath it, one sentence had been written in black ink. She remembers the lake. Ask her about October 14th. Alexander stared at the message. The compass. The same silver compass Clara had given him. October 14th. The date meant nothing, yet seeing it sent an unexpected chill through him. Someone inside the manor had left this message. Someone who knew about the compass. Someone who wanted him to trust Clara. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Alex? It was Clara. He opened the door just enough for her to step inside. She immediately noticed the note in his hand. Where did you get that? I found it downstairs. She read the sentence. The color slowly drained from her face. What is October 14th? Alexander asked. For several seconds, Clara couldn't speak. When she finally looked up, her eyes were filled with emotion. That's, she swallowed, the day we promised never to lie to each other again. Alexander's pulse quickened. What happened? Clara lowered herself into the chair beside the window. It started at the lake. She looked out into the darkness beyond the glass. And it ended with someone trying to kill you. The room fell completely silent. Alexander stared at her. For the first time since waking up, he realized the car accident might never have been an accident at all. Alexander felt the room grow colder. He searched Clara's face, hoping to find even the slightest sign that she was mistaken. Instead, he found fear. Real fear. You think someone tried to kill me? Clara didn't answer immediately. She stood and walked toward the window, watching the wind move through the ancient oak trees outside. I don't think it anymore, she said quietly. I've known it since the night of the accident. Alexander remained silent. She turned to face him. You called me just before you got into your car. His heart skipped. What did I say? You sounded frightened. I don't remember being frightened. I know. She wrapped her arms around herself. You told me someone had found something they were never supposed to find. Alexander frowned. What was it? You wouldn't tell me over the phone. Why? You said the walls had ears. Those words struck him immediately. The same warning she had given him in the office. The same feeling that followed him through Blackwood Manor. Someone was always listening. Clara continued. You asked me to meet you at Silver Lake. The old boathouse. The place where you proposed. Alexander closed his eyes. For the briefest second, a flash. Moonlight dancing across black water. A wooden dock. A woman. His chest tightened. The image disappeared. I almost remembered something. Clara smiled sadly. You will. You always come back to me. Before Alexander could answer, another memory flashed through his mind. Not a complete memory, only a sound. A woman screaming his name, tires sliding across wet pavement, glass shattering. He opened his eyes with a sharp breath. My accident. Clara nodded. You never made it to the lake. What happened after I called you? I waited for over an hour. Her voice trembled. I thought you had changed your mind. Then the police called. Alexander slowly sat on the edge of the bed. So whatever I discovered, it disappeared with the crash. That's what I thought. She looked toward the notebook resting on his nightstand. Until you found your journal. Alexander picked it up. I only read the first page. Read the next one. He hesitated before opening it. The handwriting was unmistakably his. Memory is fragile. Evidence isn't. He turned the page. If you're reading this after the accident, do not tell anyone you found this notebook. Not my parents, not Nathan. No one. His pulse quickened. The next paragraph had been underlined twice. "There is someone inside this house working against us. I still don't know who." Alexander looked up. "You read this before?" Clara slowly nodded. "You showed it to me the night before the accident." "And?" "You tore out several pages." His eyes widened. "I did?" "You said if the wrong person found the notebook, we'd both be dead." Silence swallowed the room. Alexander quickly flipped through the journal. Sure enough, several pages had been ripped out cleanly. Someone had removed an entire section. "Do you know what was written on them?" "No." "You wouldn't let me read them." He stared at the torn edges. Whatever had been written there, it was important enough for his past self to hide. A soft echoed from the hallway. Both of them froze. Neither spoke. They came again, this time louder. Alexander quietly closed the notebook. "Who is it?" A familiar voice answered. "Sir." It was the elderly butler. "I must speak with you." Alexander opened the door only a few inches. The old man's face was unusually pale. His hands trembled. "What is it?" He looked over his shoulder to make sure no one had followed him. Then he leaned closer. "I've served this family for 38 years. I've never broken Mr. Blackwood's trust." He swallowed hard. "But I can't stay silent anymore." Alexander felt his heartbeat accelerate. The butler reached into his coat and carefully handed him an old brass key attached to a faded blue ribbon. "I found this hidden inside the west attic." Alexander examined it. It was older than the first key, much older. "What does it open?" The butler's eyes filled with regret. "I don't know. But I know who hid it." Alexander looked up. "Who?" The old man took a slow, shaky breath. "You did." Before Alexander could ask another question, the lights throughout the manor suddenly went out. Darkness swallowed the hallway. Somewhere downstairs, a door. Then came the unmistakable sound of not walking. Toward Alexander's bedroom, the entire manor fell into darkness. For one suspended moment, no one moved. The silence was so complete that Alexander could hear his own heartbeat. Then the footsteps came again, fast, heavy, racing up the staircase. Clara instinctively grabbed his arm. "Alex." The elderly butler's face had turned ghostly pale. "They've cut the power." Alexander's eyes adjusted to the darkness just enough to make out the faint glow of the moon pouring through the windows at the end of the corridor. He looked toward the staircase. A shadow flashed across the landing. Someone was there, watching. Then the figure disappeared. "Stay here," Alexander whispered. Before Clara could stop him, he stepped into the hallway. "Alexander," she hissed. He ignored her. Something deep inside him had awakened. Not a memory, an instinct. He moved quietly toward the staircase, listening. Another floorboard creaked below. Whoever was inside the house wasn't trying to escape. They were searching. Alexander reached the landing and looked down. The grand entrance hall was almost completely dark, illuminated only by pale moonlight spilling through the stained glass windows. Nothing moved. Then, a faint beam of light. Someone carrying a flashlight. The beam swept across the walls before disappearing into the west corridor. Alexander followed. His footsteps were nearly silent against the polished wooden floor. The corridor led toward the oldest wing of Blackwood Manor, a place that smelled of cedar, dust, and forgotten years. The flashlight disappeared around the corner. He quickened his pace. When he turned the corner, no one. The corridor was empty. Only a single wooden door stood slightly open. A cold draft drifted from inside. Alexander pushed the door wider. Stone steps spiraled downward into darkness. A cellar. He hesitated only a second before descending. The air grew colder with every step. At the bottom waited a narrow room lined with shelves filled with old family records and sealed wooden crates. The flashlight lay on the floor, still on, still warm. Whoever had carried it had vanished. Alexander slowly turned. His eyes landed on an old iron cabinet tucked beneath the stairs. The faded blue ribbon attached to the brass key matched a tiny blue mark painted beside the cabinet's lock. His pulse quickened. This was it. He inserted the key. It resisted at first, then click. The cabinet opened. Inside rested a single black lockbox. No jewels, no money, only papers, hundreds of pages. On top sat one white envelope. His name was written across it. Alexander. His hands trembled as he opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. The first line stole the air from his lungs. If you're reading this, my greatest fear has come true. You've forgotten everything. It was his handwriting. He continued reading. Don't panic. You planned for this. Someone inside Blackwood Holdings has been stealing millions through shell companies for nearly 4 years. I found proof, but the evidence reaches far beyond the business. It reaches this family. Alexander's breathing became shallow. He turned the page. I couldn't tell Clara everything because I wasn't sure who was listening. If anything happened to me, I wanted her alive, even if it meant she hated me for keeping secrets. His chest tightened. He read faster. The accident wasn't random. I was followed the night I left the office. If I disappear, trust Clara before anyone else. She's the only person who never wanted my money, my name, or my company. She only wanted me. Alexander closed his eyes. A sharp pain exploded behind his temples. Suddenly, a flash, rain, a winding road, a black SUV in his rearview mirror, headlights growing closer, too close, someone deliberately accelerating, his hands gripping the steering wheel, his phone on the passenger seat, Clara's name on the screen. Then, a violent impact, metal twisting, glass exploding. Alexander staggered backward, clutching his head. The memory vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Footsteps echoed above him. This time they were slow, deliberate. Someone knew he was in the cellar. A voice drifted down the stone staircase, calm, almost amused. I wondered how long it would take you to find that letter. Alexander looked toward the darkness above. He couldn't see the speaker, only the outline of a figure standing perfectly still at the top of the stairs. Then the figure took one slow step forward. Moonlight spilled across polished black shoes, and a familiar voice said quietly, "Welcome back, Alexander." He knew that voice. He just couldn't remember why. Alexander's fingers tightened around the newspaper until the pages crumpled beneath his grip. His breathing became shallow. I know him. Clara looked at him carefully. You remember? Not his name. He stared at the photograph. But I've seen his face. Another flash tore through his mind. Rain hammered against the windshield. The black SUV remained a few car lengths behind him. At the next intersection, a man stepped out of a cafe, the same man from the newspaper. He watched Alexander's car pass. Then he spoke into an earpiece. The memory disappeared. Alexander grabbed the edge of the desk to steady himself. He wasn't driving. Clara frowned. What? He was watching. She exchanged a worried glance with him. What else do you remember? He closed his eyes, forcing himself to focus. There was another car. A black SUV. It followed me for miles. Every time I turned, it turned. Clara's face slowly paled. I told the police that. Alexander looked up. You did? They said you were imagining things. Silence settled between them. Someone had dismissed her concerns before the investigation had even begun. Alexander looked down at the newspaper again. When was this picture taken? The morning after the accident. His pulse quickened. Who brought it here? It was waiting outside the front door. No envelope? She shook her head. Nothing. Alexander turned the newspaper over. Something slid onto the desk. A small white envelope. Neither of them had noticed it tucked between the folded pages. There was no stamp, No address. Only one word written across the front. Alexander. He slowly opened it. Inside was a single photograph. It showed Silver Lake. The old wooden boathouse stood beneath a cloudy evening sky. On the back, someone had written, "You weren't meeting Clara that night." Alexander felt a chill crawl down his spine. "If I wasn't meeting you," Clara whispered, "then who were you meeting?" Before either of them could answer, another folded note slipped from inside the envelope. Alexander unfolded it. "Boathouse. Tonight. Come alone if you want the truth." Below the message was a time. 10 p.m. Alexander checked the grandfather clock in the library. 8:37. Just over an hour. Clara immediately shook her head. "No. I'm going. It could be a trap." "It probably is." "Then don't." Alexander looked toward the rain-covered windows. "My past is waiting there. So is whoever tried to kill you." He met her eyes. "I can't spend the rest of my life hiding from someone whose face I can't even remember." She stepped closer. "Then I'm coming with you." "No. I'm not asking." Her voice was calm but firm. "I've already lost you once. I'm not doing it again." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Alexander reached into his jacket and removed Victor Hale's sealed envelope. "I almost forgot." He broke the blue wax seal. Inside was a folded sheet of paper. Only one sentence had been written. "If anyone invites you to Silver Lake after the accident, don't go inside the boathouse." Alexander's heartbeat stopped. The invitation was already lying on the desk. Someone had predicted it. Someone knew exactly what would happen next. Suddenly, the library door burst open. Nathan stood there, breathing heavily. His face had lost all color. "Alex." He struggled to catch his breath. "You need to leave." Alexander frowned. "What happened?" Nathan looked over his shoulder before quietly closing the door. "They know you found the hidden cabinet." The room fell silent. Clara stared at him. "Who knows?" Nathan swallowed hard. "I don't have time to explain." He stepped closer. "They're already inside the manor." Alexander's eyes narrowed. "They?" Nathan's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "The people who don't want you to remember." At that exact moment, every light in the library flickered. Then the mansion's security alarm began blaring through every hallway. A mechanical voice echoed from the ceiling. "Security breach, east entrance. Security breach, east entrance." 3 loud bangs shook the front doors. Then came another, and another. Someone wasn't trying to sneak into Blackwood Manor anymore. They were trying to break in. The security alarm echoed through the manor, its shrill cry bouncing off marble walls and crystal chandeliers. No one moved. Then, another violent bang shook the front doors. The windows rattled. Somewhere downstairs, a maid screamed. Nathan turned to Alexander. "We have to go. Now." Clara didn't hesitate. "Where?" "The safe room." Alexander frowned. "There's a safe room?" Nathan nodded. "Our grandfather built it during the Cold War. Hardly anyone knows it exists." Eleanor's voice suddenly rang out from the hallway. "Nathan!" All 3 of them froze. Her footsteps grew closer. Nathan, urgently, "Don't tell her about the cabinet." Before Alexander could answer, the library doors swung open. Eleanor stood there, perfectly composed despite the chaos. Only the slight rise and fall of her breathing betrayed her concern. "The police are on their way," she said. Nathan forced a smile. "Good." Her eyes moved slowly from Nathan to Clara, then finally settled on Alexander. "Are you all right?" "I am. You should stay here." Alexander noticed something strange. She hadn't asked what had happened. She hadn't asked who was outside. It was as though she already knew. Outside, another crash echoed through the entrance hall. Edward rushed into the library. "They've forced the front gate." Eleanor's expression changed for the first time. How many? At least 4. Alexander looked at his father. Who are they? Edward hesitated. I don't know. Alexander didn't believe him. Not anymore. The house staff hurried through the corridors, locking doors and closing heavy shutters. The elegant manor suddenly felt like a fortress under siege. Nathan quietly touched Alexander's arm. Follow me. Without waiting for permission, he slipped through a narrow door hidden behind one of the library bookcases. Alexander and Clara followed. The passage beyond was dark and narrow, lit only by old wall lamps. As the bookshelf slid shut behind them, the sounds of the manor became distant. They walked in silence. Finally, Alexander spoke. How long have you known about this passage? Nathan gave a humorless, our entire childhood. He ran his hand along the rough stone wall. We used to hide here whenever Mom and Dad argued. Alexander looked at him. They argued often? Nathan's smile disappeared. You don't remember much, do you? Alexander shook his head. Nathan, our family wasn't always like this. What changed? Nathan didn't answer immediately. You became CEO. Alexander stopped walking. What? Nathan turned to face him. The company changed you. Clara spoke softly. No. Nathan looked at her. You know that's not true. She met his eyes. The company didn't change him. Fear did. Nathan lowered his gaze. For a brief moment, guilt crossed his face. Before Alexander could ask what she meant, they reached the end of the tunnel. Nathan pressed his hand against the stone wall. A hidden door slowly opened. Beyond it lay a small underground room, steel walls, emergency lights, shelves filled with food, water, radios, and first aid supplies. The safe room. As the heavy door closed behind them, the silence felt almost unreal. Alexander sat at the metal table, trying to organize the pieces of a life he no longer understood. His eyes drifted toward an old corkboard mounted on the wall. Pinned to it were faded family photographs. One picture immediately caught his attention. It showed 2 boys standing beside a lake. One was clearly Nathan. The other was him. Behind them stood a smiling man with his arm around both brothers. Alexander frowned. I know, Dad. His finger moved to the third man. But who is he? Nathan looked at the photograph. The color drained from his face. He walked over and slowly removed it from the board. Forget you ever saw this. Alexander stood. Who is he? Nathan remained silent. Tell me. Finally, Nathan, his name is Daniel Hale. Alexander felt a sharp pain behind his eyes. Hale. Nathan nodded. Victor Hale's son. The room spun. Victor had said he was once Alexander's mentor. Why had his son been in family photographs? Before anyone could speak again, the emergency radio crackled to life. A frightened voice came through the speaker. Mr. Blackwood. It was the elderly butler. They're inside the house. A loud burst of static followed. Then, in a terrified, the old man said, They're asking for the notebook. The transmission cut off. The room fell silent. Alexander slowly reached into his jacket. The notebook was gone. Alexander stared at the inside of his jacket. His hand searched every pocket again. Then again. Nothing. The notebook had disappeared. A cold wave of panic washed over him. No. Clara immediately stood. What is it? My notebook. He looked at her, his voice barely above a "It's gone." Nathan frowned. That's impossible. I had it when we left the library. You must have dropped it. Alexander shook his head. I never let go of it. Silence settled over the safe room. Each of them replayed the last few minutes in their minds. The library, the hidden passage, the tunnel, the safe room. There had been no one else. Unless someone had followed them. A sharp knock echoed against the heavy steel door. Everyone froze. 3 slow knocks. Then silence. Nathan instinctively reached for the emergency flashlight resting on the shelf. Nobody move. Another knock, this time accompanied by a familiar voice. "Mr. Blackwood?" It was the butler. Alexander hurried toward the door. Nathan grabbed his arm. "Wait." He activated the small security monitor mounted beside the entrance. The screen showed the elderly butler standing alone in the corridor. His uniform was stained with blood. A deep cut marked his forehead. Nathan unlocked the door. The old man stumbled inside. Clara rushed forward. "Oh my God." "I'm all right. It's only a scratch." Alexander closed the steel door behind him. "What happened?" The butler struggled to catch his breath. "They searched the entire West Wing. They overturned your office. They were looking for something. The notebook." The old man nodded. "Yes." Alexander's stomach tightened. "Who are they?" The butler looked toward Nathan, then toward Clara. Finally, he met Alexander's eyes. "I never saw their faces. They wore black clothing. Masks. But," he hesitated, "I recognized one voice." Alexander leaned closer. "Whose?" The butler lowered his head. "I'd rather not say." "Why?" "Because if I'm wrong, it will destroy this family." Nathan exchanged a worried glance with Alexander. The old man reached into his coat pocket. "I managed to save one thing before they found the office." He carefully placed a folded sheet of paper on the table. Alexander unfolded it. It was one of the missing pages from his notebook. The torn edge matched perfectly. His own handwriting filled the page. "There are 3 people I trust." Below it were 3 names: Clara, Mr. Whitmore. The butler quietly wiped a tear from his eye. "I never knew." Alexander continued reading. The 3rd name had been completely covered by black ink. Someone had deliberately crossed it out, again and again, so violently that the paper had nearly torn. Clara looked at him. "Can you tell who it was?" Alexander held the page closer to the light. Beneath the ink, he could barely make out the first letter, an N. Nathan stepped back. That could mean anything. It could. Nathan, Nicole, Nicholas. No one spoke. The butler suddenly looked toward the steel door. His face turned pale. "Did you hear that?" Everyone listened. At first, nothing. Then, a faint metallic scraping, like someone dragging steel across concrete. It came from the other side of the corridor. Slow, deliberate. Closer. Nathan quietly switched off the emergency light. Darkness swallowed the room. Only the tiny security monitor continued glowing. On the black and white screen, the empty corridor remained still. Then a figure stepped into view. Tall, wearing black, its face hidden beneath a hood. The stranger stopped directly outside the safe room. Slowly, very slowly, the figure lifted its head and looked straight into the security camera. Then it smiled, as if it had known all along exactly where they were hiding. No one spoke. The figure remained perfectly still on the security monitor, its face hidden beneath the shadow of a dark hood. Only the smile was visible. Calm, patient, almost familiar. Alexander felt an uneasy chill spread through his chest. "Do you know who that is?" Clara whispered. He slowly shook his head. "I wish I did." The stranger lifted a gloved hand, not to knock, not to force the door. Instead, 2 fingers touched the camera lens. The screen dissolved into static. Then it went black. The room was swallowed by silence. Nathan cursed under his breath. "They've found us." The butler looked toward the emergency radio. "They shouldn't know about this room." "They do now," Alexander replied. His eyes drifted to the torn notebook page still lying on the table. Someone had crossed out the third name with furious determination. Why? Who had erased it? He picked up the page again, studying every line. Something caught his attention. The ink wasn't the same. The first two names had been written with a fountain pen. The black scribbles covering the third name came from a thick marker. Different handwriting, different pressure. Someone else had altered the page. "I didn't do this," Alexander murmured. Clara looked up. "What?" "I never crossed out the third name." Nathan frowned. "How can you know that?" Alexander pointed to the paper. "Whoever did this used a different pen." A heavy silence followed. If someone had changed his journal, then someone had been inside his office long before tonight. The butler suddenly spoke. "I remember something." Everyone turned toward him. "It was about 6 weeks before your accident. You asked me to bring this notebook to your office. I accidentally opened it." His face filled with guilt. "I only read one sentence." Alexander stepped closer. "What sentence?" The old man closed his eyes, searching his memory. "You wrote," he took a slow breath, "if anything happens to me, it won't be because of business." Alexander's heartbeat quickened. The butler continued. "You wrote one more line." His voice became almost a whisper. "It will be because I trusted the wrong person." Those words settled over the room like a storm cloud. Nathan lowered his eyes. Clara reached for Alexander's hand, but stopped herself before touching him. He noticed. For some reason, he wished she hadn't stopped. Before anyone could speak again, the emergency lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then the room went completely dark. Only a faint red backup light glowed above the steel door. A loud metallic clang echoed through the corridor outside. The hooded stranger wasn't trying to hide anymore. Someone struck the steel door. Once. The sound echoed through the room. A second strike followed, stronger. Dust drifted from the ceiling. Nathan backed away. That door can withstand explosives. A third strike. This one wasn't louder. It was slower, more deliberate, as though whoever stood outside knew they had nowhere left to run. Then, the blows stopped. Complete silence. Alexander held his breath. A tiny slot in the center of the steel door slowly slid open from the outside. A single white envelope slipped through the opening and landed on the floor. No one moved. No one dared pick it up. Finally, Alexander walked forward. His name was written across the front in elegant handwriting. Not printed. Written. He opened it carefully. Inside was a photograph. It showed him standing beside Victor Hale on the dock at Silver Lake. Both men were smiling. On the back, written in the same elegant script, were 7 chilling words. "Ask Victor who really died that night." Alexander stared at the message. His pulse thundered in his ears. He looked up just as a distorted voice echoed through the small opening in the steel door. "You've been searching for the wrong truth." The voice paused. Then, with unsettling calm, it added, "Your memories aren't what were stolen, Alexander. They were replaced." The words echoed inside the safe room long after the voice fell silent. They were replaced. Alexander stood motionless, the photograph trembling slightly between his fingers. Replaced? That wasn't possible. Memory could be lost, damaged, forgotten, but replaced? The slot in the steel door slid shut with a sharp, metallic click. Silence returned. No footsteps, no voices. Whoever had delivered the message was gone. Nathan hurried to the security panel, desperately pressing buttons. "The cameras are still offline." Edward picked up the photograph from the table. "This picture," his face drained of color. "I've never seen it before." Alexander looked at him. "You know Victor." Edward hesitated. "I knew him." "Knew? We haven't spoken in years." "Why?" Edward looked away. "We had a disagreement." Clara folded her arms. "About what?" Edward remained silent. It was Eleanor who answered. The safe room door opened behind them. Everyone turned. She stepped inside, calm as ever, escorted by 2 security guards. "I'll tell you." Nathan frowned. "Mom, how did you find us?" "I've known about this room since I was 23. Her gaze settled on the photograph. "So, you finally found Victor?" Alexander stepped toward her. "You know where he is?" "No, but I know what he wants." "And what's that?" Revenge." Alexander's jaw tightened. "For what?" Eleanor looked directly into his eyes. "For his son's death." The room fell silent. Alexander remembered the old photograph from the corkboard. Daniel Hale, Victor's son. The man standing beside him and Nathan as children. What happened to Daniel? No one answered. Finally, Edward spoke. "He drowned." Alexander frowned. "At Silver Lake?" Edward slowly nodded. "When we were 17. A sharp pain exploded behind Alexander's eyes. The room blurred. Another memory forced its way to the surface. Sunlight. Warm air. 3 teenage boys laughing on the dock. Nathan, Daniel, himself. Someone shouting. A splash. Then panic. Alexander staggered backward. "I was there." Edward rushed toward him. "Easy." "I was there," Alexander repeated. "I remember the lake." Tiny fragments continued to appear. Daniel diving into the water. Nathan yelling. A rope. Blood. Then darkness. The memory vanished. Alexander struggled to breathe. "I couldn't save him." Edward placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "It wasn't your fault." Alexander looked at him. "Then whose fault was it?" Before Edward could answer, the emergency radio crackled. The butler's frightened voice filled the room. "Mr. Blackwood!" Everyone froze. "I've restored 1 security camera." Static interrupted him. "It shows the east hallway." Nathan rushed to the monitor. The screen flickered to life. A grainy black and white image appeared. The hallway outside Alexander's office. Empty. Then, a woman walked into view. She wasn't wearing a mask. She wasn't hiding. She walked calmly toward the office door and unlocked it with a key. Alexander leaned closer. His heartbeat stopped. The woman wasn't a stranger. It wasn't Clara. It wasn't Eleanor. It was Dr. Evelyn Carter, the neurologist who had treated him in the hospital. She entered his office as though she had done it many times before. 30 seconds later, she emerged carrying the missing leather notebook. She slipped it into her bag, looked directly into the security camera, and smiled. Then the screen filled with static once again. No one spoke. Clara finally broke the silence. "The doctor." Her voice barely rose above "She was never trying to help you." Alexander stared at the blank monitor. For the first time since the accident, one thing became painfully clear. The conspiracy hadn't started at Blackwood Manor. It had followed him from the hospital. And if his own doctor had stolen the notebook, then someone had been controlling his recovery from the very beginning. The safe room fell into stunned silence. Alexander couldn't take his eyes off the blank security monitor. Dr. Evelyn Carter. The woman who had assured him that memories would return naturally. The woman who had looked him in the eyes and said, "Don't let anyone decide your memories for you." Now she was the one stealing the notebook that could have helped him remember. "It doesn't make sense, Clara. Why would she risk coming here herself?" Nathan folded his arms. "Because she knew exactly where to look." Alexander slowly turned toward him. "You're saying someone told her?" Nathan nodded. "Someone inside this house." Edward. "We have a traitor." "No, Eleanor, we've had one for years." Everyone looked at her. It was the first time since the accident that her voice carried something other than control. It carried regret. Alexander stepped closer. "You knew?" "I suspected." "And you never told me?" "I couldn't." His expression hardened. "You couldn't, or you wouldn't?" Before Eleanor could answer, Clara spoke. "Enough." Everyone fell silent. She looked directly at Alexander. "We're asking the wrong question." He frowned. "What do you mean?" She pointed toward the photograph Victor had left. The message said, "Ask Victor who really died that night." She paused. It didn't say who was murdered. It didn't say who disappeared. It said, "Who died?" Alexander looked down at the photograph again. Something about those words felt deliberate, carefully chosen. His headache returned, not sharp this time, slow, persistent. Another memory surfaced. Silver Lake, night, rain, Victor shouting, someone lying motionless on the dock, a gold necklace, a hand covered in blood. Then, a voice, his own. This changes everything. The memory vanished. Alexander grabbed the edge of the table. I remembered another piece. "What did you see?" Clara asked. "A body." Nathan's face went pale. "What?" I couldn't see the face. "But someone was lying on the dock." Edward closed his eyes. "No." Alexander looked at him. "You know something." Edward remained silent. "You've known this entire time." His father slowly sat down, suddenly looking years older. "When Daniel disappeared," he began, "everyone believed he drowned." Alexander listened without blinking. "But," Edward swallowed, "no body was ever recovered." The room froze. Clara looked from Edward to Alexander. "What are you saying?" Edward's voice barely rose above "I'm saying Daniel Hale was legally declared dead." He paused. "But no one ever proved he actually was." A chill spread through the room. Nathan shook his head. "That's impossible." Edward looked at his son. "Is it?" Alexander felt the pieces shifting again. Victor wanted revenge. The mysterious messages all pointed back to Silver Lake. Someone claimed the wrong person had died. And now, the person everyone believed had drowned might never have died at all. A sudden vibration broke the silence. Alexander reached into his pocket. His phone. The screen displayed unknown number. No one spoke. Slowly, he answered. "Hello?" At first, there was only static. Then came the sound of water gently moving against wood. Waves. A dock. His heart began to pound. A man's calm voice finally spoke. "You remembered the lake." Alexander tightened his grip on the phone. "Who is this?" The caller ignored the question. "Good. That means you're ready for the next memory." A sharp breath caught in Alexander's throat. "What do you want?" "I want you to stop believing the people standing around you." Alexander instinctively looked at his family, then at Clara. The voice continued. "There's only one person in that room who knows exactly what happened on the dock 12 years ago." Alexander's pulse thundered. "Who?" The caller. "You've been looking at them all night." The line went dead. Silence swallowed the room. Alexander slowly lowered the phone. His eyes moved across every face. Edward, Nathan, Eleanor, the butler. Finally, they stopped on Clara. She wasn't looking at him anymore. She was staring at the photograph in his hand, and for the first time since he'd met her again, she looked terrified. Alexander followed Clara's gaze to the photograph in his hand. She wasn't simply looking at it. She was looking at one small corner of it, as though she'd just noticed something she wished she hadn't. "Clara." She didn't answer. "Clara." Slowly, she lifted her eyes to meet his. "What is it?" he asked. Her lips parted, but no words came. Alexander turned the photograph over once more. Silver Lake. The dock. Victor standing beside him. At first, it looked ordinary. Then he saw it. Near the edge of the frame, reflected in the still water, was the faint outline of another person. Only part of a face, barely visible, but unmistakably there. Someone had been watching them. "You've seen this before," Alexander said quietly. Clara nodded. "Yes, When? The night before your accident. His pulse quickened. You never told me. You wouldn't let me. He frowned. What do you mean? You showed me the photograph. You pointed at the reflection. You kept saying. She closed her eyes, hearing his voice as clearly as if it were yesterday. He was there the whole time. Alexander felt another wave of pressure build behind his eyes. Fragments returned. His office, rain against the windows. The photograph spread across his desk, a magnifying glass. His own voice repeating, "Someone lied about who was at the lake." The memory faded again. Nathan stepped closer. What reflection? Alexander handed him the photograph. Nathan studied it carefully. His expression remained unchanged. I don't see anything. Clara gently took it back. She tilted it toward the light. There. Nathan's face stiffened. He stopped. You see it now, Alexander said. Nathan slowly lowered the photograph. Yes. Do you recognize the person? A long silence followed. Finally, Nathan, I recognize the coat. Everyone looked at him. It belonged to Daniel. The room went completely still. Edward stared at his younger son. That's impossible. I'm telling you what I remember. Eleanor folded her arms. You're guessing. No. Nathan's voice was firmer now. I bought that coat with him. Alexander looked between them. If Daniel was wearing that coat, he struggled to finish the sentence. Then he wasn't in the water. Clara nodded slowly. He was standing on the dock. Another memory flashed through Alexander's mind. Daniel arguing with someone. Victor shouting. A loud splash. Then, running footsteps. Someone leaving the dock before the police arrived. Alexander. There were 4 people. Edward looked at him. What? Not 3. There were 4. The pain vanished as quickly as it had come. He leaned against the table, breathing heavily. I still can't see the 4th face. The emergency radio suddenly crackled. The butler picked it up. Static hissed for several seconds before a frightened voice broke through. Mr. Whitmore. It was one of the housekeepers. They've left. Nathan frowned. Who left? The people outside. They're gone. Alexander exchanged a puzzled look with Clara. They just walked away? The radio crackled again. No, the housekeeper whispered. They didn't leave empty-handed. Alexander's stomach tightened. What did they take? The answer came after a long pause. They opened the family mausoleum. No one spoke. Even Eleanor seemed stunned. The mausoleum? Edward repeated. The housekeeper's voice trembled. Sir. The coffin. It's gone. Alexander felt every hair on the back of his neck stand up. What coffin? The radio fell silent. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, the housekeeper answered, Daniel Hales. The words echoed through the safe room. Daniel Hales. No one spoke. Alexander looked from one face to another. Edward's hands had begun to tremble. Nathan had gone completely still. Even Eleanor, who always seemed to have an answer, looked shaken. Clara was the first to break the silence. Why would Daniel's coffin be inside the Blackwood mausoleum? Edward slowly lowered himself into a chair. Because, he rubbed a hand across his face, after the accident at the lake, Victor disappeared. We couldn't find him. Daniel had no other family nearby. So your grandfather offered a place in the family crypt. Alexander frowned. But there was never a body. Edward nodded. The coffin was symbolic. A memorial. Nathan looked confused. Then why would someone steal an empty coffin? No one had an answer. Alexander's thoughts raced. An empty coffin, a missing notebook, a neurologist stealing evidence, a stranger claiming his memories had been replaced. None of it fit together. Unless... They weren't looking for the coffin, he said quietly. Everyone turned toward him. They were looking for whatever was hidden inside it. Silence. Edward's eyes widened. Oh my God. Alexander looked at him. You know something. Edward stood so abruptly that his chair scraped across the concrete floor. I hoped no one would ever find it. What? Edward looked at each of them before finally meeting Alexander's eyes. Years ago, Victor gave me something. He said if anything ever happened to him, I was never to tell anyone where it was. Alexander felt his pulse quicken. You hid it in the coffin. Edward nodded once. I believed no one would ever think to look there. What was it? Edward swallowed. A cassette tape. The room fell silent. A tape? Nathan asked. Edward nodded. Victor said it contained the truth about Silver Lake. Alexander stared at him. You've had it all these years. I never listened to it. Why not? Because I promised him. Clara shook her head in disbelief. You protected a promise instead of finding the truth? Edward's shoulders slumped. I thought I was protecting all of you. Alexander turned away, trying to steady his breathing. Another fragment surfaced. A small recording device. Victor placing a cassette into his hand. If anything happens to me, don't let them erase what really happened. The memory disappeared. Alexander looked back at his father. Someone knew about the tape. Edward nodded. Apparently. Nathan frowned. But how? Before anyone could answer, the emergency radio crackled again. This time it wasn't the frightened housekeeper. It was the voice of the head of security. Mr. Blackwood. Edward grabbed the radio. Go ahead. We've searched the grounds. And? There are fresh tire tracks leading away from the mausoleum. Edward closed his eyes. Anything else? A long pause followed. Then the guard spoke again. Yes, sir. We found something left behind. What is it? Another pause. It appears to be a portable cassette player. No one in the room breathed. Alexander slowly looked toward Edward. If they left the player behind, he felt his heartbeat thunder in his ears. Then they already have the tape. The radio crackled one last time. Sir, there's something else. Edward's grip tightened. What now? The guard hesitated. The player wasn't empty. There was already a cassette inside. Alexander's eyes narrowed. A different tape? Yes. What's on it? The guard answered in a hushed voice. It only contains one sentence. What sentence? Static filled the room before the guard finally replied. A man's voice says, Alexander Blackwood has been remembering the wrong life. No one spoke. The sentence lingered in the room like a ghost. Alexander Blackwood has been remembering the wrong life. Edward slowly lowered the radio. What does that even mean? Alexander wished he knew. His memories were already fractured. Now someone was telling him they weren't merely incomplete, they were false. He looked toward Clara. She seemed just as shaken as everyone else. She wasn't acting, he was certain of that. The question was, who wanted him to believe otherwise? Nathan broke the silence. We need that tape. Edward nodded. I'll have security bring it here. No. Alexander's voice was calm but firm. I'm going. Clara immediately stepped forward. You're still recovering. I've spent days waiting for answers. He looked at each of them. Every hour someone else decides what I should know. I'm done waiting. Nathan reached into a nearby locker and removed a small flashlight. I'll come with you. Alexander shook his head. If the messages are true, someone inside this family is being manipulated. Nathan's face fell. You think it's me? I don't know what to think. The words hurt Nathan more than Alexander intended, but they were honest. Trust had become a luxury. As they prepared to leave the safe room, the butler quietly approached Alexander. "Sir." Alexander turned. The old man held out a small velvet pouch. "I've kept this for many years." Alexander opened it. Inside was an antique silver pocket watch. Its glass was cracked. The initials AB were engraved on the back. "You carried it every day until the accident." Alexander carefully opened the cover. Instead of a photograph, there was a tiny handwritten note folded inside, his own handwriting. He unfolded it. Only 6 words were written. "Trust your heart before your memories." His chest tightened. He read the sentence again. His own past had left him clues, not about money, not about the company, about people. He slipped the watch into his coat pocket. "I'll bring it back." The butler smiled sadly. "I believe you will." 15 minutes later, Alexander and Clara crossed the silent gardens toward the family mausoleum. The rain had stopped, but a thick fog had settled across the estate. Moonlight filtered through the mist, casting long shadows between the marble statues. The mausoleum door hung open. Someone had forced the ancient lock. Alexander swept the flashlight across the floor. Broken stone, mud, fresh footprints. "They were here recently," Clara whispered. He nodded. Inside, rows of stone crypts lined the walls. At the far end stood the empty space where Daniel Hale's memorial coffin had rested. The lid lay shattered nearby. Alexander knelt beside it. Deep scratches covered the wood, as if someone had searched every inch. Then his flashlight caught something glinting beneath a broken plank. A small brass button. He picked it up. He wasn't ordinary. An eagle was engraved across its surface. His heartbeat quickened. Another memory burst into focus. Rain, a struggle, someone grabbing his jacket, one of the attacker's buttons tearing loose and falling onto the dock. The same button. Alexander stared at it. "I've seen this before." Clara looked over his shoulder. "Where?" "The night of the accident." He closed his eyes. The memory grew stronger. The man who attacked him. The man who pushed him toward the road. He wasn't wearing black. He was wearing a dark military-style coat, with brass eagle buttons. Alexander opened his eyes. "I remember." His voice was barely a whisper. "He wasn't trying to rob me. He was trying to stop me." Clara frowned. "Stop you from what?" Before Alexander could answer, a flashlight beam swept across the entrance of the mausoleum. Both of them froze. Someone was standing outside. A familiar voice echoed through the fog. "Don't move." Alexander slowly turned. Standing at the doorway was Dr. Evelyn Carter. She wasn't alone. 2 armed men stood behind her. She calmly held Alexander's missing leather notebook in one hand. Then she smiled. "You've remembered more than I expected." She paused. "But not the one memory that could destroy all of us." The cold night air settled over the cemetery. Alexander stood motionless inside the mausoleum, the brass button still clutched in one hand. Dr. Evelyn Carter stepped through the doorway with calm confidence, the leather notebook resting beneath her arm. The 2 men beside her remained silent, their flashlights sweeping slowly across the room. Neither pointed a weapon. That unsettled Alexander more than if they had. "You've been busy," Evelyn said. Her voice carried the same gentle warmth she'd used in the hospital, only now it sounded rehearsed, artificial. "You lied to me," Alexander replied. She smiled faintly. "I omitted the truth. You stole my notebook. I protected it." Clara stepped in front of Alexander. "Protected it from him?" "Protected it from everyone." Evelyn's eyes softened as they settled on Clara. "You've always been brave. But bravery isn't the same as understanding." Clara's jaw tightened. "I understand enough." "No," Evelyn slowly shook her head. "You only know the story Alexander allowed you to know." Alexander felt another sharp ache behind his eyes. "What does that mean?" Evelyn took one careful step forward. "The man you were before the accident trusted almost no one. She held up the notebook. Not even me. Then why were you helping me? Because you asked me to. Silence filled the mausoleum. Alexander frowned. What? You came to my office 6 weeks before your accident. You told me someone was following you. You believed your memories might become a target. My memories? You were terrified. Evelyn's voice remained steady. You said if anyone couldn't silence you, they would make you doubt yourself. Alexander searched her face. A fragment surfaced. A medical office. A closed door. Himself sliding a thick folder across a desk. If anything happens to me, promise me you won't let anyone rewrite who I am. The memory vanished. He staggered slightly. Clara caught his arm. Alex, I'm all right. But he wasn't. The pieces were beginning to fit, only they formed a picture he didn't recognize. You expected this to happen, he whispered. Evelyn nodded. You planned for it. Alexander looked at the notebook. If that's true, why steal it? Because someone else was looking for it. You could have given it to me. No. Her answer came immediately. You weren't ready. Alexander's frustration boiled over. When was I supposed to be ready? When you started asking your own questions instead of repeating everyone else's answers. She gently tossed the notebook onto the stone coffin behind him. You've reached that point. Alexander stared at it. So you're giving it back? I'm giving you a choice. What choice? Open it. He picked up the notebook. It felt strangely familiar in his hands. Evelyn continued. The pages you haven't read contain names. Names of everyone involved. Clara's breathing caught. Alexander slowly opened the cover. The remaining pages were still there, untouched. His fingers stopped at the first unread section. Across the top of the page, written in bold handwriting, were 5 words. People I was wrong about. His heart pounded. Below the title was a list. The first name made him freeze. Victor Hale. Next to it, his own handwriting read, Not the enemy. He turned the page. The second name appeared. Dr. Evelyn Carter. Underneath, Not who I believed she was. Alexander looked up in disbelief. You knew I'd suspect you. Evelyn gave a sad smile. I counted on it. He turned another page, the third name. His breathing stopped. Nathan Blackwood. There was no explanation, only a single question written beneath it. Victim or accomplice? Alexander slowly lifted his eyes toward his brother. Nathan had gone completely pale. He wasn't looking at Alexander. He was staring at the notebook, as if he already knew exactly what was written on the next page. The echo of the gunshot rolled across the cemetery before fading into the night. No one moved. The armed man lay motionless on the cold stone floor, his flashlight spinning slowly until its beam settled on the cracked walls of the mausoleum. Alexander instinctively stepped in front of Clara. Victor Hale's voice carried through the fog once more. Alexander, you don't have much time. Dr. Evelyn Carter closed her eyes for a brief moment. They found us. The second guard rushed toward the entrance, drawing his weapon. Before he could reach the doorway, another voice cut through the darkness. Don't. The command was calm, firm. The guard froze. A tall figure emerged from the fog. His clothes were soaked from the rain. His beard was streaked with gray. A long scar crossed his left cheek. Alexander stared at him. His heart began pounding for reasons he couldn't explain. The man looked directly at him. I've waited 12 years for this moment. Victor stepped into the light beside him. This is why I wanted you to remember first. Alexander couldn't breathe. He looked from Victor to the stranger. Who is he? Victor answered quietly. The man everyone buried. Silence. The stranger slowly removed the hood from his coat. His eyes filled with emotion. Hello, Alex. The sound of that voice struck something buried deep inside Alexander's mind. A memory exploded into focus. 2 teenage boys diving into Silver Lake, late-night drives with the windows down, arguments, laughter, brotherhood, not by blood, by choice. Alexander staggered backward. "Daniel." The stranger smiled sadly. "You finally remember my face." Clara covered her mouth. Nathan's knees nearly gave out. Edward leaned against the stone wall as if all the strength had left his body. Eleanor remained perfectly still. Daniel looked older than Alexander remembered, harder, but unmistakably alive. Alexander whispered, "You didn't die." Daniel shook his head. "No. Everyone believed you drowned." "They were supposed to." Alexander frowned. "What does that mean?" Daniel glanced toward Victor before answering. "The night at Silver Lake. Someone tried to kill me." The cemetery fell silent. "I survived. But if people knew I was alive, they would have come back to finish the job." Alexander felt another memory rising. This one stayed. Rain hammered the roof of the old boathouse. Daniel stood in front of him, soaked to the skin. He was terrified. "They know I found it." Alexander heard his own voice. "What did you find?" Daniel reached into his jacket and removed a thick folder. Financial documents, bank transfers, photographs, names. So many names. Then, the boathouse door burst open. A masked man entered. Another followed. Someone shouted. A gun fired. Glass shattered. Alexander flinched as the memory ended. He opened his eyes, breathing heavily. "The folder." Daniel nodded. "You remembered." "What was inside?" Daniel looked toward the Blackwood estate in the distance. "Evidence." "Evidence of what?" Victor answered. "Corruption." Edward lowered his head. Victor continued. "Blackwood Holdings wasn't being robbed by strangers. It was being robbed by people sitting inside its own boardroom." Alexander remembered the shell companies, the missing millions, the notebook. Everything was beginning to connect. Daniel stepped closer. "You weren't investigating because you wanted money back." Alexander looked at him. "You were investigating because those missing funds were financing something much worse." "What?" Daniel's expression darkened. "People disappeared, Alex. Employees, journalists, whistleblowers, anyone who got too close." A cold shiver ran through Alexander. "My accident." Daniel nodded slowly. "You weren't the first. You were supposed to be the last." Before Alexander could speak again, the sound of approaching engines echoed through the cemetery. Headlights pierced the fog. 1, then 2. Then 6 black SUVs rolled through the cemetery gates, surrounding the mausoleum from every direction. Victor looked toward the lights. His expression hardened. "They're here." Alexander's heartbeat quickened. "Who?" Victor slowly reached inside his coat. "They call themselves—" He stopped as dozens of armed figures stepped out of the vehicles. Each wore the same dark military-style coat. Each coat carried identical brass eagle buttons, the same button Alexander had found inside the mausoleum. Victor looked directly into Alexander's eyes. "The people you've been chasing have finally come to finish what they started." The cemetery fell deathly quiet. The black SUVs formed a perfect circle around the mausoleum, their headlights cutting through the fog like blades. Dozens of men stepped out in perfect formation. No one spoke. No one rushed forward. They simply waited. Alexander counted at least 20. Every one of them wore the same dark military-style coat, the same brass eagle buttons, the same polished black gloves. One man finally emerged from the center vehicle. Unlike the others, he wasn't armed. He carried only a black umbrella. His silver hair glistened beneath the rain, and his tailored charcoal suit looked impossibly immaculate despite the muddy ground. He stopped several yards from the mausoleum. His eyes settled on Alexander. Then he smiled. It wasn't cruel, it was disappointed. "So," he said calmly, "you finally remembered enough to become dangerous again." Alexander had never seen the man before, yet something inside him tightened. "Who are you?" The stranger ignored the question. Instead, he looked toward Daniel. "You've hidden long enough." Daniel took one step forward. "My hiding ended the day you murdered innocent people." The man's expression never changed. "Murder is such an emotional word." Victor's voice became sharp. "Tell him your name." The stranger sighed. "My name no longer matters." Alexander took another step. "It matters to me." The man studied him for a long moment before answering. Gabriel Voss. The name meant nothing, at least, until another memory surged through Alexander's mind. A luxury hotel ballroom, crystal chandeliers, a charity gala, a handshake. "Mr. Voss, thank you for investing in Blackwood Holdings." Alexander gasped. "You were on the board." Gabriel smiled. "Very good." Edward closed his eyes. "I knew this day would come." Alexander turned toward his father. "You know him?" Edward nodded slowly. "For nearly 20 years." Clara looked between them. "What is he talking about?" Edward struggled to answer. "Gabriel wasn't just an investor. He built half of Blackwood Holdings with my father." Gabriel gave a polite nod. "And I was rewarded with betrayal." Daniel laughed bitterly. "Betrayal? You stole from the company." Gabriel's smile disappeared. "I took what I created." Victor stepped forward. "You financed criminal networks. You bought judges. You bribed politicians. You paid to silence anyone who exposed you." Gabriel didn't deny a single word. Instead, he looked at Alexander. "You were supposed to inherit an empire. You chose to become a detective." Alexander's jaw tightened. "I chose the truth." "No." Gabriel shook his head. "You chose Clara." Silence. Alexander looked at Clara. Gabriel continued. "The day she entered your life, you stopped being predictable. You stopped caring about power. You started asking questions." His eyes narrowed. "And questions are dangerous." Alexander felt another memory slam into him. His office, late at night, Clara asleep on the sofa beneath a blanket. Alexander placing another document into a growing pile of evidence. He remembered smiling. "One more week," he had whispered. "Then we're free." The memory faded. He looked back at Gabriel. "You were afraid I'd expose you." Gabriel's expression remained calm. "I was afraid you'd destroy everything. You tried to kill me. I tried to stop you. You murdered people. I protected what thousands depended on." Daniel stepped forward angrily. "You destroyed lives." Gabriel looked at him with complete indifference. History doesn't remember sacrifices. It remembers winners. The rain intensified. Thunder rolled across the sky. Alexander slowly walked out of the mausoleum until only a few feet separated him from Gabriel. "You've been manipulating my memories." Gabriel smiled faintly. "No. I merely helped others manipulate your perception." Alexander frowned. "What does that mean?" Gabriel glanced toward Dr. Evelyn Carter. "It means your memories were never erased. They were buried beneath carefully chosen lies." Alexander's heartbeat quickened. "Lies told by who?" Gabriel looked directly into his eyes. "By the person you trusted more than anyone." The world seemed to stop. Alexander slowly turned. Every face around him looked stunned. Clara? Nathan? Edward? Victor? Evelyn. One of them had helped shape the life he believed was real. And somewhere among them was the one person who had betrayed him from the very beginning. The world seemed to stop. Alexander slowly turned. Every face around him was frozen. Clara, Nathan, Edward, Eleanor, Victor, Daniel. Even Dr. Evelyn Carter remained silent. Rain continued to fall, tapping softly against the cracked stone of the mausoleum roof. Alexander's heartbeat echoed louder than the storm. Gabriel Voss watched him with quiet satisfaction. "Go on," Alexander said, his voice steady despite the fear tightening in his chest. "Finish what you started." Gabriel slowly closed his umbrella. "I've spent 12 years waiting for you to ask the right question." "And what question is that?" Gabriel tilted his head. "Not who betrayed you, but why." Alexander clenched his fists. "I don't care why." "You should." Gabriel stepped forward until only a few feet separated them. "Because betrayal born from greed is predictable. Betrayal born from love," he smiled faintly, "is almost impossible to recognize." Alexander felt a strange unease settle over him. He glanced toward Clara. She looked just as confused as he was. Gabriel noticed. "You still look at her first." Alexander met his gaze. "Because she's the only person who's never stopped believing in me." Gabriel laughed quietly. "You still don't understand." Daniel took a step toward Gabriel. "Leave her out of this." Gabriel ignored him. Instead, he reached into his coat and removed an old leather wallet. Slowly, he opened it. Inside rested a faded photograph. He held it out toward Alexander. "Take it." Alexander hesitated before accepting it. The photograph had clearly been taken years earlier. 3 people stood on the dock at Silver Lake. Alexander recognized himself immediately. Beside him stood Daniel. The third person. He froze. It was Clara. Only she looked younger, much younger. Her hair was shorter. She couldn't have been more than 18. Alexander stared at the picture. He looked up at Clara. "You were there." She slowly nodded. "Yes. You told me we'd never been to the lake together before." A tear rolled down her cheek. "I lied." The single word shattered something inside him. "Why?" "I promised someone I would." "Who?" She couldn't answer. Instead, Daniel spoke. "I asked her." Alexander turned sharply toward him. "You?" Daniel nodded. "If anyone knew she was there that night, she would have been killed too." Alexander looked back at the photograph. Every certainty he had built over the last few days suddenly felt fragile. "You've known each other all along." Clara wiped away another tear. "Since we were children." "You never told me." "I wanted to." "When?" "The day we got married." Alexander frowned. "You still didn't." "I tried." She looked down at the wedding ring still resting on her finger. "You stopped me." A faint memory stirred. Their wedding night, a quiet cabin, Clara sitting beside a fireplace, holding an old photograph, asking, "Are you sure you don't want to know everything?" His own voice answered, "No. Whatever happened before tonight, we leave it behind." The memory faded. Alexander closed his eyes. "I told you not to tell me." Clara nodded. "You said if you knew too much, you'd never stop chasing the past." Gabriel smiled. "And yet, here you are." Victor stepped beside Alexander. "Don't let him control the conversation." Gabriel sighed. "You always did ruin dramatic moments, Victor."
Victor's eyes never left Gabriel. "You've manipulated people for decades. You've lied. You've bribed. You've murdered. But tonight," he stepped closer, "it's over." Gabriel looked almost amused. "Do you really believe that?" "I know it." Gabriel slowly clapped his hands, once, twice, 3 times. The armed men surrounding the mausoleum immediately raised their flashlights. Bright white beams flooded the cemetery. Alexander instinctively shielded his eyes. When his vision adjusted, he noticed something he hadn't seen before. None of the men were pointing weapons at him. Every weapon was aimed at Gabriel. For the first time that night, Gabriel's confident expression disappeared. One of the men removed his hood, then another, then another. Alexander recognized one of them immediately. It was the head of security from Blackwood Holdings. Another was one of the investigators whose name appeared in the notebook. A third was a detective Alexander vaguely remembered from years ago. The head of security lowered his weapon. "Gabriel Voss," he said firmly, "this operation is over." Gabriel looked around slowly.
Realization settled across his face. "You've been working with him." The detective smiled. "No." He glanced toward Alexander. "We've been waiting for him to remember." Alexander stood speechless. Everything Victor had done, everything Evelyn had hidden, the notebook, the clues, the memories, none of it had been about solving the mystery alone. They had been carefully guiding him toward one moment. This one. The moment when he would finally remember enough to identify the only man they could never legally accuse without his testimony. Gabriel looked directly into Alexander's eyes one last time. "You think you've won." His smile returned. "But you still haven't remembered the one secret Clara has kept from you." Alexander slowly turned toward her. She wasn't looking at Gabriel anymore. She was looking at Alexander. With tears in her eyes and an apology already written across her face. Alexander could no longer hear the rain. The voices around him faded into a distant murmur. His eyes remained fixed on Clara. For the first time since waking up in the hospital, she couldn't meet his gaze. She lowered her head. Tears slipped silently down her cheeks. Gabriel Voss smiled. "There it is. The look I was waiting for." Alexander ignored him. He took one slow step toward Clara. "What secret?" She closed her eyes. "I wanted to tell you." "When?" "Every day." "Then why didn't you?" Her voice trembled. "Because I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "That if you remembered," she struggled to finish the sentence, "you'd never forgive me." Alexander searched her face. He didn't see manipulation. He didn't see deception. Only guilt. Real guilt. Victor stepped forward. "Clara," she gently shook her head. "No. This has to come from me." Daniel quietly placed a reassuring hand on Victor's shoulder. Neither man interrupted. The cemetery had become completely silent. Even Gabriel seemed curious. Clara finally looked at Alexander. "You remember the day you proposed?" He frowned. "Only pieces." "You rented the old cabin beside Silver Lake. You filled it with candles because you knew I hated expensive restaurants." A faint smile crossed Alexander's face. Another memory surfaced. Hundreds of tiny lights reflecting across the lake. A simple silver ring. Clara laughing through tears. "Yes. Of course, yes." The memory warmed him, then disappeared. Clara continued. "That night, you asked me one question." Alexander listened carefully. "You asked if I believed people deserved a second chance." His heartbeat slowed. "What did you answer?" "I said," she smiled sadly, "everyone deserves one." She took a slow breath. "And that's when I made the biggest mistake of my life." Alexander felt his chest tighten. What mistake? I didn't tell you that I'd already given someone else one. Silence. Gabriel folded his arms. Now we're getting somewhere. Alexander looked at Clara. Who? She swallowed hard. Daniel. Alexander blinked. What? Daniel closed his eyes. I told her not to. Clara immediately shook her head. No, it wasn't your fault. She turned back toward Alexander. The night everyone believed Daniel drowned, he came to me. Alexander frowned. Before he disappeared? She nodded. He was terrified. He said someone inside Blackwood Holdings wanted him dead. He begged me not to tell anyone he was alive. Alexander looked toward Daniel. You trusted him. I'd known him since we were children. I couldn't abandon him. So you helped him disappear? Yes. Alexander remained silent. Clara continued. For 12 years, I never told a single person. Not my parents, not your family, not even you. Until the night before your accident. Alexander's heart skipped. You told me? She nodded. I couldn't keep lying to you. I told you everything. Another memory flashed through his mind. The living room, the fire burning low, Clara crying, Daniel standing outside in the darkness, Alexander opening the front door, then embracing his oldest friend. The memory stayed, longer than the others. He remembered Daniel's first words. I'm tired of hiding. Alexander whispered, I remember. Clara's eyes filled with hope. You do?
He nodded slowly. You introduced us again.
Daniel smiled faintly. You almost punched me. A small laugh escaped Clara through her tears. You actually did. Alexander rubbed the back of his neck. I did? You thought I was breaking into your house. For the first time in days, they all laughed. It was brief, fragile, but real. Gabriel watched the moment with quiet disgust. You people really are sentimental. His voice instantly killed the warmth. Alexander turned toward him. You tried to use this against us. Gabriel shrugged. Secrets are more useful than bullets. Alexander stepped closer. You failed. Did I? Gabriel smiled again. You still don't know why Daniel was hiding. Daniel's expression darkened. Don't. Gabriel ignored him. He looked directly at Alexander. Ask him what he took from me. Alexander frowned. What is he talking about? Daniel remained silent. Gabriel's smile widened. The folder wasn't the only thing Daniel stole. Alexander looked from Gabriel to Daniel. Daniel? His old friend slowly reached inside his coat. He removed a small velvet pouch tied with a faded blue ribbon, the same blue ribbon that had been attached to the hidden key. I never wanted you to remember this part. Alexander stared at the pouch. What is it? Daniel carefully opened it. A gold wedding ring slipped into his palm. Not Clara's, not Alexander's. The inside of the ring was engraved with a single date, October 14th. Alexander's heartbeat stopped. He recognized the ring because it had once belonged to him. Alexander couldn't take his eyes off the gold ring resting in Daniel's palm. The engraving caught the glow of the SUV headlights. October 14th. His breathing became shallow. I know that date, he whispered. Daniel slowly closed his fingers around the ring. You should. It was the day you gave this to me. Silence. Alexander frowned. I never gave you my wedding ring. No, Daniel shook his head. It wasn't your wedding ring. It was your father's. Alexander looked toward Edward. His father had turned pale. You remember now, don't you? Daniel asked softly. Alexander closed his eyes. Another memory surfaced, not broken, not blurred, clear. He stood on the dock at Silver Lake years earlier. Edward was beside him. The older man removed a gold ring from his own hand. He placed it into Alexander's palm. "One day, you'll know who deserves this." The memory faded. Alexander opened his eyes. "Dad." Edward nodded slowly. "It belonged to your grandfather before me. It was our family's promise." Alexander looked back at Daniel. "Why did I give it to you?" Daniel smiled sadly. "Because I was leaving." Another memory returned, the night Daniel disappeared. They stood alone on the dock. Rain poured from the sky. Daniel looked exhausted, terrified. Alexander had pressed the ring into his friend's hand. "Keep it. If anyone ever doubts who you are, bring it back to me." Alexander's knees weakened. He remembered. Not everything, but enough. "I told you to disappear." Daniel nodded. "You begged me. You said if I stayed, I'd be dead before sunrise." Alexander looked toward Gabriel. "You were hunting him." Gabriel offered no reply. Instead, he quietly adjusted the cuff of his coat. "I underestimated you." Alexander ignored him. He looked back at Daniel. "I promised I'd expose them." "You did." "I failed." Daniel stepped closer. "No. You survived." Alexander shook his head. "I lost everything." "No." Daniel smiled faintly. "You forgot." "There's a difference." Those words settled deep inside Alexander. Forgot, not lost. His memories weren't gone forever. They were waiting. Another image appeared. His office. The evidence spread across the desk. Clara standing beside him. She wrapped her arms around him from behind. "When this is over, let's leave all of this behind." Alexander remembered smiling. "Where would we go?" "Anywhere no one knows our names. A little house by the sea. No board meetings. No bodyguards. Just us." The memory lingered. Long enough for him to feel the warmth of her embrace. Long enough to remember how deeply he had loved her. He slowly turned. Clara stood only a few feet away. Tears streamed down her face. "You remembered," she whispered. Alexander walked toward her. Every step felt lighter than the last. When he finally stood before her, he gently reached for her trembling hand. For the first time since waking in the hospital, he didn't hesitate. Their fingers intertwined naturally, as though they had never forgotten each other. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "So am I. I made you carry this alone." She shook her head. "I would have carried it forever if it meant keeping you alive." Alexander smiled through tears. "I know." He slowly lifted her hand and kissed it. A simple gesture, one that unlocked another memory. Their wedding, the vows, the music. Clara laughing because he had forgotten the rings in his jacket. Everyone applauding. He laughed softly. "You laughed at me." She blinked in surprise. "You remember that?" "I kept patting every pocket except the right one." Clara laughed through her tears. "You were so nervous." "I was terrified." "You whispered," she smiled, "that marrying me was the only business decision you were happy to make." Alexander laughed. "I actually said that?" "You did." The sound of their laughter echoed through the cemetery. For one brief moment, the years of fear, lies, and heartbreak disappeared. Gabriel watched them without emotion. Then he slowly reached into his coat. Victor's eyes widened. "Alexander!" The warning came a fraction of a second too late. Gabriel pulled out a small black remote. He pressed a single red button. Somewhere beneath the mausoleum, a deep, mechanical rumble shook the ground. The stone floor trembled violently. Cracks raced across the marble like lightning. Daniel's expression changed instantly. No. Victor looked toward the crypt. He planted explosives. The first explosion erupted beneath the cemetery. Stone columns split apart. Dust filled the air. As the ceiling began to collapse, Alexander grabbed Clara's hand and pulled her toward the exit. Behind them, Gabriel Voss smiled. His plan had never been to escape. It had been to bury every secret, along with everyone who knew the truth. The first explosion was followed by a second. The ground lurched beneath Alexander's feet. Stone fragments rained from the ceiling as the ancient mausoleum groaned under the force of the blast. "Run!" Victor shouted. Alexander tightened his grip around Clara's hand. He refused to let go again. Never again. Another deafening explosion echoed beneath the crypt. A marble pillar cracked down the center before crashing across the entrance. Dust swallowed everything. For several terrifying seconds, Alexander could see nothing. Only Clara's hand in his. Only the sound of her breathing. "I'm here," she whispered. "I know." He pulled her closer as another section of the ceiling collapsed behind them. Daniel rushed toward Victor, helping the older man away from the falling debris. "Nathan!" Edward shouted through the dust. A cough answered him. "I'm here!" Alexander swept his flashlight across the chaos. Nathan was pinned beneath a fallen beam. Without thinking, Alexander released Clara's hand and ran toward him. "No!" Clara cried. The beam was far too heavy for one person. Alexander planted both hands beneath it and pushed with everything he had. It barely moved. Daniel was beside him a second later. Together they lifted the broken timber just enough for Nathan to pull himself free. The moment he rolled away, the beam crashed back onto the floor. Nathan looked at Alexander, his eyes filled with disbelief. "You came back for me." Alexander helped him to his feet. "You're my brother." Nathan lowered his head. "I don't deserve that." Alexander frowned. "What do you mean?" Nathan looked toward the collapsing ceiling. "There isn't time." "There is." Nathan shook his head. "I have to tell you before it's too late." Another explosion shook the crypt. Dust poured through fresh cracks in the walls. Nathan drew a shaky breath. "The night of your accident." Alexander listened without speaking. "Gabriel came to me." His voice broke. "He said you were destroying the company. He told me investors would lose everything. He said thousands of people would lose their jobs." Alexander's expression remained calm. "And you believed him?" "I wanted to." Nathan looked away in shame. "I told him where you were going that night." The words echoed through the collapsing chamber. Edward closed his eyes. Clara covered her mouth. Daniel remained perfectly still. Nathan continued, tears filling his eyes. "I thought they were only going to scare you. I swear to you. I never imagined they'd try to kill you." Alexander stared at his younger brother. Every clue, every warning, every missing piece, it all led back to that single decision. Nathan had unknowingly betrayed him, not out of hatred, out of fear. "I've hated myself every day since," Nathan whispered. "When you lost your memory, I thought maybe it was my punishment." Alexander slowly stepped toward him. Nathan couldn't look at him. "I understand if you never forgive me." Silence hung between them. Then Alexander remembered another fragment. The brothers as children. Nathan falling through the ice on a frozen pond. Alexander diving into the freezing water without hesitation. Their father wrapping blankets around both of them afterward. "No matter what happens, you protect each other." Alexander's eyes softened. "You made the worst mistake of your life." Nathan nodded silently. "But you weren't the one who ordered my death." Nathan looked up. "No. Gabriel was." Alexander placed a hand on his brother's shoulder. "Then I'll hold the guilty man responsible." Nathan broke down, unable to stop the tears. "I'm so sorry." "I know." Before another word could be spoken, a loud metallic crash echoed outside the mausoleum. The explosion stopped. The silence that followed felt even more frightening. Victor looked toward the entrance. His face grew tense. "He isn't running." Daniel frowned. "What?" Victor slowly shook his head. Gabriel never planned to escape. Alexander turned toward the shattered doorway. Through the drifting dust, Gabriel Voss was still standing exactly where they had left him. His umbrella lay discarded at his feet. His suit was covered in gray ash, yet he hadn't moved an inch. He looked directly at Alexander. Then, with unsettling calm, he reached into his inside pocket and removed a thick envelope. He held it high enough for everyone to see. "I suppose," he called across the ruined cemetery, "it's finally time for you to read your wife's last letter." Clara's face turned white. "No," she whispered. "You promised you'd destroyed it." Gabriel smiled. "I lied." Alexander slowly turned toward Clara. His heart began to pound again. "What letter?" A tear escaped down Clara's cheek. It had been to bury every secret, along with everyone who knew the truth. The first explosion was followed by a second. The ground lurched beneath Alexander's feet. Stone fragments rained from the ceiling as the ancient mausoleum groaned under the force of the blast. "Run!" Victor shouted. Alexander tightened his grip around Clara's hand. He refused to let go again. Never again. Another deafening explosion echoed beneath the crypt. A marble pillar cracked down the center before crashing across the entrance. Dust swallowed everything. For several terrifying seconds, Alexander could see nothing. Only Clara's hand in his. Only the sound of her breathing. "I'm here," she whispered. "I know." He pulled her closer as another section of the ceiling collapsed behind them. Daniel rushed toward Victor, helping the older man away from the falling debris. "Nathan!" Edward shouted through the dust. A cough answered him. "I'm here!" Alexander swept his flashlight across the chaos. Nathan was pinned beneath a fallen beam. Without thinking, Alexander released Clara's hand and ran toward him. "No!" Clara cried. The beam was far too heavy for one person. Alexander planted both hands beneath it and pushed with everything he had. It barely moved. Daniel was beside him a second later. Together they lifted the broken timber just enough for Nathan to pull himself free. The moment he rolled away, the beam crashed back onto the floor. Nathan looked at Alexander, his eyes filled with disbelief. "You came back for me." Alexander helped him to his feet. "You're my brother." Nathan lowered his head. "I don't deserve that." Alexander frowned. "What do you mean?" Nathan looked toward the collapsing ceiling. "There isn't time." "There is." Nathan shook his head. "I have to tell you before it's too late." Another explosion shook the crypt. Dust poured through fresh cracks in the walls. Nathan drew a shaky breath. "The night of your accident." Alexander listened without speaking. "Gabriel came to me." His voice broke. "He said you were destroying the company. He told me investors would lose everything. He said thousands of people would lose their jobs." Alexander's expression remained calm. "And you believed him?" "I wanted to." Nathan looked away in shame. "I told him where you were going that night." The words echoed through the collapsing chamber. Edward closed his eyes. Clara covered her mouth. Daniel remained perfectly still. Nathan continued, tears filling his eyes. "I thought they were only going to scare you. I swear to you, I never imagined they'd try to kill you." Alexander stared at his younger brother. Every clue, every warning, every missing piece, it all led back to that single decision. Nathan had unknowingly betrayed him, not out of hatred, out of fear. "I've hated myself every day since," Nathan whispered. "When you lost your memory, I thought maybe it was my punishment." Alexander slowly stepped toward him. Nathan couldn't look at him. "I understand if you never forgive me." Silence hung between them. Then Alexander remembered another fragment, the brothers as children. Nathan falling through the ice on a frozen pond. Alexander diving into the freezing water without hesitation. their father wrapping blankets around both of them afterward. No matter what happens, you protect each other. Alexander's eyes softened. You made the worst mistake of your life. Nathan nodded silently. But you weren't the one who ordered my death. Nathan looked up. No. Gabriel was. Alexander placed a hand on his brother's shoulder. Then I'll hold the guilty man responsible. Nathan broke down, unable to stop the tears. I'm so sorry. I know. Before another word could be spoken, a loud metallic crash echoed outside the mausoleum. The explosion stopped. The silence that followed felt even more frightening. Victor looked toward the entrance. His face grew tense. He isn't running. Daniel frowned. What? Victor slowly shook his head. Gabriel never planned to escape. Alexander turned toward the shattered doorway. Through the drifting dust, Gabriel Voss was still standing exactly where they had left him. His umbrella lay discarded at his feet. His suit was covered in gray ash, yet he hadn't moved an inch. He looked directly at Alexander. Then, with unsettling calm, he reached into his inside pocket and removed a thick envelope. He held it high enough for everyone to see. I suppose, he called across the ruined cemetery, it's finally time for you to read your wife's last letter. Clara's face turned white. No, she whispered. You promised you'd destroyed it. Gabriel smiled. I lied. Alexander slowly turned toward Clara. His heart began to pound again. What letter? A tear escaped down Clara's cheek.
The one I wrote, after I thought I'd lost you forever.
The rain softened until only a fine mist drifted through the cemetery. Alexander couldn't look away from the envelope in Gabriel's hand. His heart pounded with a different kind of fear. Not fear of dying, fear of discovering one more truth that would change everything. What letter? He asked again. Clara stood motionless. Her hands trembled at her sides. It wasn't supposed to exist anymore. Gabriel smiled. Some words deserve to survive. Alexander stepped toward him. Give it to me. Gabriel held the envelope just out of reach. Not yet. You've manipulated enough. I haven't manipulated this. He looked at Clara. She wrote every word. Clara slowly nodded. I did. Alexander searched her eyes. When? The third day after your accident. I was still unconscious. I know, she swallowed. The doctors told me you might never wake up. A painful silence settled between them. Clara continued. I couldn't say the things I needed to say while everyone was watching. So I wrote them. Gabriel carefully removed a folded sheet of paper from the envelope. The edges were worn, creased, as though it had been opened many times. I'll save everyone some time. He unfolded it. I'll read it. No! Clara cried. Gabriel ignored her. His voice became surprisingly gentle, almost respectful. My dearest Alex, if you're hearing these words, then it means I never found the courage to tell you this myself. Alexander felt his chest tighten. Gabriel continued reading. People think the greatest fear is losing someone you love. They're wrong. The greatest fear is watching the person you love forget the life you built together while you're still standing beside them. Clara closed her eyes. Tears rolled silently down her cheeks. If you wake up and don't remember me, I promise I won't ask you to love me again. Love isn't something that should be begged for. Alexander felt his vision blur. I'll simply stay close enough to catch you if you fall. Even if you never remember my name. Daniel quietly lowered his head. Nathan wiped his eyes. Even Victor turned away. Gabriel read the final lines. And if one day your memories return, don't apologize for forgetting me. Just promise me you'll never forget yourself. Silence. Only the rain remained. Alexander slowly walked toward Clara. She couldn't speak. She couldn't even look at him. I wrote that because I thought, she struggled to breathe.
I thought I'd already lost you." Alexander gently took the letter from Gabriel's hand. He looked at the familiar handwriting, every curve of every letter. It wasn't just ink, it was hope. He folded the paper carefully, then slipped it into the inside pocket of his jacket. "Thank you." Clara looked up. "For what?" "For loving the man I couldn't remember." Fresh tears escaped her eyes. "I never stopped." "I know." For the first time since waking in the hospital, Alexander wrapped his arms around her. Not because he was trying to remember, because he already had. He remembered how safe she felt, how every difficult day ended the same way, with her. Clara buried her face against his shoulder. "I thought I'd lost you forever." "You almost did." He rested his forehead against hers. "But you didn't." Behind them, Gabriel let out a quiet sigh. Touching. The warmth vanished instantly. Gabriel reached into his coat once more. This time, he removed a pistol. Victor reacted first. "Alexander!" The shot echoed across the cemetery. Time seemed to stop. Alexander instinctively turned, shielding Clara with his body. The bullet never reached them. Daniel threw himself between them at the last possible second. The impact spun him backward. He collapsed onto the rain-soaked ground. "Daniel!" Victor shouted. Alexander dropped beside him. Blood spread across Daniel's jacket. Daniel looked up at Alexander and managed a weak smile. "I guess," he whispered. "I finally kept my promise." Alexander gripped his friend's hand. "No. Stay with me." Daniel's breathing became shallow. "I told you. I'd always have your back." The rain grew heavier. Somewhere beyond the cemetery walls, police sirens finally pierced the night, growing louder with every passing second.
The sound of approaching sirens grew louder. Blue and red lights flickered through the fog, painting the cemetery in flashes of color. Alexander knelt beside Daniel, pressing both hands against the wound. "Stay with me." Daniel let out a weak laugh. "You always were stubborn." "Save your strength." Daniel shook his head. "I've spent 12 years hiding. I don't want to waste another second." His breathing became uneven. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small flash drive. The same blue ribbon that had been tied to the hidden key was wrapped around it. He placed it into Alexander's hand. The folder wasn't enough. Alexander stared at it. "What's on this?" "Everything. Bank records. Names. Recordings. The original files." Daniel smiled faintly. "You made me promise that if anything happened, I'd keep a copy." Alexander closed his fingers around the drive. "You kept your promise. I learned from the best." Nearby, Gabriel slowly backed away toward one of the waiting SUVs. Victor noticed immediately. "He's running!" Gabriel fired another shot into the air. The armed men around him scattered in confusion. It was all the distraction he needed. He climbed into the vehicle and slammed the door. The engine roared to life. Alexander stood. No. Without thinking, he sprinted across the rain-soaked cemetery. "Alex!" Clara shouted. The SUV lurched forward, tires spinning through the mud. Alexander reached the driver's door and grabbed the handle. Gabriel swerved violently, trying to throw him off. Alexander held on. The vehicle slammed through the broken cemetery gate. Branches whipped across the windshield. Mud sprayed in every direction. Inside the SUV, Gabriel looked at him with cold determination. "You never knew when to quit." Alexander pulled himself onto the running board. "I learned that from you." Gabriel struck him across the face with the pistol. Pain exploded through Alexander's jaw. His grip slipped, but he refused to let go. Another memory surged back. The night of the accident, the same road, the same rain. Gabriel's SUV forcing him toward the guardrail. Now he remembered everything. Every turn, every impact, every lie.
You, Alexander whispered. It was always you. Gabriel smiled. Finally. You remember. Alexander drove his elbow through the driver's window. Glass shattered across the dashboard. Gabriel lost control of the steering wheel. The SUV skidded sideways. It crashed into an enormous oak tree with a deafening impact. The airbags exploded. Silence. Smoke drifted from beneath the hood. Alexander staggered away from the wreck, coughing. Gabriel tried to crawl through the broken windshield. Before he could stand, dozens of police vehicles surrounded the road. Officers rushed forward. "Don't move!" Gabriel looked around. There was nowhere left to run. For the first time all night, fear crossed his face. An officer pulled him to the ground and secured his hands behind his back. As he was led away, Gabriel looked back at Alexander one last time. "You think you've won?" Alexander met his gaze. "I don't." "I know." Gabriel gave one final bitter smile. The truth destroys everyone eventually. He disappeared into the waiting police vehicle. The rain finally began to ease. Minutes later, Clara reached Alexander. Without saying a word, she threw her arms around him. He held her tightly. "I remember everything." She slowly pulled back. "Everything?" He smiled through exhausted tears. "Our first date. The cabin. The wedding. The night we danced barefoot in the kitchen because the power went out." Clara laughed softly. "You hated dancing." "I still do. But I'd dance with you every day for the rest of my life." She rested her forehead against his. "You already promised me that once." Alexander smiled. "Then I'll spend the rest of my life keeping that promise." Behind them, paramedics lifted Daniel onto a stretcher. He was still conscious. As they carried him toward the ambulance, he raised a hand toward Alexander. Alexander returned the gesture. This time, it wasn't goodbye. It was the beginning of finally bringing 12 years of lies to an end.
The Man Who Forgot How to Love. Part 30. Epilogue. 1 year later. Spring arrived quietly at Blackwood Manor. The gardens that had once felt cold and forgotten were alive again. White roses climbed the stone walls, lavender swayed gently in the breeze, and the fountain in the center courtyard flowed for the first time in years. The house no longer felt like a monument to old secrets. It felt like a home. Alexander stood on the balcony overlooking the gardens, a warm cup of coffee resting between his hands. For the first time in a long time, silence brought him peace instead of questions. The memories had returned slowly, not all at once. Some had come in dreams, others while hearing a familiar song or catching the scent of Clara's jasmine perfume drifting through the hallways. The doctors had told him that memory wasn't like opening a locked door. It was more like watching the sunrise. Light returned little by little, and eventually, the darkness disappeared. The balcony door slid open behind him. "You've been hiding out here for 20 minutes." Alexander smiled before turning around. "I was waiting for you." Clara walked toward him, carrying 2 freshly baked pastries. "You say that every morning." "Because it's true every morning." She laughed, handing him one of the pastries. "I still think you're trying to flatter me." I stopped trying. She raised an eyebrow. "So now it comes naturally?" He nodded. "It always did." She rolled her eyes playfully before slipping her hand into his. Neither of them wore expensive watches anymore. Neither cared. Their wedding rings were enough. "So," Clara asked, "are you nervous?" Alexander looked toward the driveway. Several black cars had begun arriving. Journalists, board members, employees. Today was the official reopening of Blackwood Holdings. After months of investigations, every fraudulent account connected to Gabriel Voss had been uncovered. Millions of dollars had been recovered. Families who had lost loved ones finally received answers. The executives involved in the corruption were arrested. Others resigned before they could be charged. The empire Gabriel had spent decades manipulating had finally collapsed. Edward retired shortly afterward,
admitting that his silence had allowed the corruption to grow. Nathan accepted responsibility for his mistakes and spent the past year helping investigators uncover every remaining connection to Gabriel's network. The brothers were slowly rebuilding what had been broken between them. Trust. It took time, but they were trying. Victor Hale declined every public interview. Instead, he quietly returned to the lakeside cabin where he had lived in hiding for years. As for Daniel, Alexander smiled. A familiar voice echoed from the garden below. "I heard that." Alexander leaned over the balcony. Daniel stood beside the fountain, looking healthier than anyone had expected. The bullet had narrowly missed his heart. After months of recovery, he had finally returned to the life stolen from him 12 years earlier. He looked up and grinned. "You still smile every time you see me." Alexander laughed. "I spent 12 years thinking you were dead. I think I've earned a few smiles." Clara squeezed Alexander's hand. "You definitely have." A car door closed at the front entrance. Nathan looked up toward the balcony. "They're ready." Alexander nodded. "We'll be down." Nathan smiled. "I'll save you a seat." As everyone disappeared inside, Alexander remained where he was for another moment. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. The folded letter, Clara's letter. He still carried it every day, not because he feared forgetting again, but because it reminded him of something far more important. Love wasn't measured by perfect memories. It was measured by the people who stayed when memories failed. He unfolded the letter one last time. His eyes stopped on the final sentence. "Don't apologize for forgetting me. Just promise me you'll never forget yourself." He carefully folded it again, then slipped it back into his pocket. Clara gently rested her head against his shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" Alexander smiled as he looked across the gardens. "The hospital." She looked up. "The hospital?" "The first thing you said when I opened my eyes." She laughed softly. "You woke up." He nodded. "I thought that was the beginning of our story." He turned toward her. "But now I know." He gently kissed her forehead. "It was simply the beginning of remembering the life we had already built."
Clara smiled through happy tears.
"I'd live it all over again."
So would I. They stood together beneath the warm spring sun as the wind carried the scent of blooming roses across the estate. The past would always be part of them, but it no longer controlled them. Some stories end with revenge, others end with justice, the best ones end with hope. And sometimes, love doesn't need to be remembered to survive. It simply waits until the heart finds its way home. The end.